It should be another episode of the Four Horsemen. So that
Right, it
means we
should
have the
be
three of
another
us. Oh,
episode.
no, it's at four. Yeah, there's always a guest. Like, I hope you're getting that by now. It's the way it's always going to go. I think we should personally do episodes where it's like there's just three of us and they just complain all the time, but that's just me. So obviously we've got the usual three people here, but our guest for this episode is going to be GoMeZ, who used to work for a long time as the manager, basically, of all those Renegades teams, all the teams from Australia with Sponge, JKS, Azza, etc. Now works with Order, who obviously is a team from the Oceanic region. He did technically, as a result, I will say at the beginning of this episode, technically, ages ago, GoMeZ did used to work for Monty. So you might be worried, what about nepotism? Listen, if you know anything about the CSGO team for Renegades, they fucking hate Monty. No, only some of them do. That's only partly a joke. So, and obviously now, in theory, one of the reasons we wanted him as the guest for this one is not only is he someone who's played, been in the position of like the people who communicate for the players, the tournaments, etc., but actually, I've noticed you always tend to get involved in a lot of the discussions about like rules and how the tournament stuff's done. So more knowledgeable, I think, than most of the other people out there. Been around the scene for a long time. I'll also say at the beginning of this episode, since we're going to be discussing some of the fuck ups of the RMRs, particularly obviously the Flashpoint one. Monty obviously works for Flashpoint. What is your actual title now? Like Vice President or something? What is it?
Well, I'm Commissioner of the League and VP of Brand.
VP of Brand, okay. Right, as though there'll be one of those in a year, but whatever. So Monty obviously works for Flashpoint. That brand's just done completely, mate. But and then Richard doesn't work for Flashpoint. I know people just decide he has, apparently. That's what sucks for you, Rich. You didn't even get any money out of it. You still get the blame for all the shit, you know?
You've just described the last 17 years for me in esports. Yeah,
there you go.
much.
And obviously, I used to work for Flashpoint, and I will state, just for the sake of clarity, notice how it doesn't affect the conversation. I can still say this. I do technically have shares within Flashpoint, but again, what the fuck's that worth, eh? I'm just keeping them for the lulz at this point because either they're worth nothing, I can just go, well, your shares are worth nothing, or maybe somehow they fucking trip over and it succeeds and I still get some out of it anyway, don't I? So I win.
You know, the funny thing about this, like people saying, oh, Monty can't be on the show because it's a conflict of interest. Let me explain conflicts of interest to you. Me being on this show and discussing the issue does not actually affect anything that really happens, right? Which means that the conflict of interest isn't really there. You guys all know that I work for Flashpoint. That is very clear. There's no hiding that information, correct? So that's not what a conflict of interest is because I have no power in this scenario. Just to be super clear on that, because people get fucking confused for some reason.
Well, and also it was really hard to find anyone who could actually like stand up for Flashpoint. So, you know, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Who's left at this point, you know?
But also, seriously, it doesn't serve two masters, does it? This show, this show doesn't. Like, I mean, obviously, me and Duncan are gonna fucking wreck Flashpoint. Like, probably, I'm guessing.
You're guessing. Look, he's bouncing up and down with excitement right now.
Yeah, I know, right?
In some ways. Ways.
So, fucking whatever.
By the way, before we get because obviously, listen, we'll set up the whole context of the topic, blah blah blah. But one thing I thought maybe at the beginning we should ask Monty, because obviously the context of him being on the show, this will be relevant. Is one of the reasons I asked what your title was there, Monty, is technically as the commissioner, you do speak publicly for the league. That is one of the roles of a commissioner. And as the VP of the brand, people also would consider you like a spokesperson, like the person they associate with the brand at this point in time, right? When this whole incident happened, which we'll get into the specifics of in a minute, obviously, but just everyone just knows abstractly a scenario happened that was a fuck up, right? You publicly came out and basically said, like, I'm actually not going to involve myself in this at all. I'm just going to sort of leave it to the admins and not do anything with that at all, right? What would you say about that? Because some people might say, you know, why not get involved? Why not try and figure out the best messaging? Or why didn't you want to be the person who delivered the message? What would you say to that? Why did you sort of recuse yourself from it?
Okay, so in terms of real conflicts of interest, I did have a real one here, which is why I recused myself. So typically at previous Flashpoints, my job is partially in league operations. So I'm the one making a lot of the decisions about if there are going to be penalties, like we find about
like the MIBR one, for example.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
10,001, yeah.
Yeah. So, and you know, talking to them about rules or how those rules should be implemented. Now, part of the deal with Valve is that Valve requested that I recuse myself from league operations for the RMR. And the reason is because I am directly employed by the partner teams. And because it was a Valve circuit event, I had a conflict of interest because I could advance the interests of our partner teams in what is supposed to be a neutral event that's a qualifier for the major, which is a completely reasonable request, and obviously we were happy to do it. And it the reason why that was necessary actually played out, because the problem with me having any kind of influence over that situation is that the winner of the NIP and Anonymo match faced one of our partner teams in FPX. So if I had any kind of decision-making power there, it could be viewed as me trying to give FPX a specific opponent, right? So it actually was very impactful, because even though we only had one partner team at the tournament, which was FPX, it just so happened that this incident would have affected them. So it's completely reasonable that I was not, I have my opinions about what happened, but ultimately I was not the one making the call or doing any of the messaging really surrounding it, besides, what I said personally, either the words out of my mouth on the broadcast, like apologizing to Snacks, or, my tweets, basically.
Right, but just from knowing how these shows go, etc., I think Richard should do it where we establish what actually happened. Essentially, if you can do a chronological order, you tend to be pretty good at nailing the exact order things went in.
I have done that occasionally in my work as a journalist. Yes. So yeah, basically what happened was NIP, Ninjas in Pajamas, went out and they made a big signing, didn't they? They signed Device from Astralis and everybody, and there was much rejoicing in the streets of Sweden. Because finally NIP had a player that was kind of akin to players NIP had in the past. So there's a big PR offensive. There's a completely open, press gaggle that all the journalists went to and asked shitty questions like, what's your favorite color, Device? Things like that. And then we get into the Flashpoint tournament. This is their debut. The first time we are going to see Device in action. For the Ninjas in Pajamas. Everybody was laughing at how easy they had got it because they were playing Anonymo. Anonymo are a Polish team that not a lot of people had time for, even though they had Snacks on the team, formerly
great.
Considered
washed now, though.
But considered washed as fuck now, although actually played unbelievably well.
Didn't he?
Roll back the years. But everyone, even on the broadcast, everyone was saying, this is super easy for Nip. They couldn't have had it any better if they planned it. So there's a lot of expectation about that result. Anyway, just prior to the game starting, Ninjas in Pajamas are saying that when they try and connect to the server, they're getting packet loss. They claim as high as 40%. There was a lot of confusion about this. They tried to do a clever little thing where they sent people like me, for example, server logs, but then they weren't the real server logs. They were logs checking the server cluster. So geographically it was correct, but it wasn't the server that was used in the game. So again, we don't know specifically how bad it was for how long this packet loss was. Anyway, in accordance with Flashpoint rules, stupid rules, as we'll touch upon later, they were told you have to play the game and then sort of retroactively appeal the decision. So NIP said, all right then. And they went out and they smashed the first map 16-3, and we're all high-fiving each other and crunking and living the dream. Then they move on to Nuke. It's close. I think it was 16-13. They lost. Then they formally said, no, listen, this is ridiculous. We don't want to play anymore. The ping's wrecking us. We got to do something about this. Cue delays, cue bullshit, and apparently Flashpoint did resolve the issue, or so they thought at this juncture.
We were told by NIP that the issue had been resolved by sometime before map 3. Now the problem was,
which is corroborated itself by the fact that after map 3, Nip themselves tweeted exactly that. They actually claimed that it had been fixed, right?
So, and thanked their sponsor for their role in it. Yeah.
So the issue is that because this is complicated by RMR rules that Valve put in place. So what happened was apparently the players knew that the issue hadn't been resolved once they got a few rounds into the game, but because there are new rules on the RMR that prevent coaching staff from being in the same room as the players during a game, there was no way to communicate between the players and their staff that the issue had in fact not been resolved.
Right.
So we thought it had been resolved, which is why people are like, well, why didn't you delay? Well, we were literally told it was fixed. And even though it wasn't fixed, there wasn't a way to know that because of the new RMR rules that Valve, because of the coach cheating scandal that happened earlier this year or last year.
Yeah. So anyway, they say it's all been fixed, leads everyone to believe it's been fixed. But then they play the final map, Mirage, and of course it goes to overtime, and they lose in overtime. Q, holy hell, which involved, in no particular order, Device having a tantrum, I believe, on Discord admins, a particularly big tantrum. Because I imagine the pressure's got to him a little bit.
Of course.
You know, so it's not excusable, but it's understandable.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
He publicly then tweeted and had a little bit of a tantrum. Hitcham Chaheen, the original Nicola Nyholm, the blueprint for all subsequent Nicola Nyholms, tweeted that it was a disgrace and Flashpoint must never get the RMR again, while behind the scenes also having a massive fucking tantrum and threatening to leverage all sorts of influence he had in the scene to try and hurt Flashpoint. And then basically what ended up happening was there was a call of the admins. They looked at the rules, and as the Flashpoint statement did say, that basically in line with the rules, they would be entitled to a replay as it was Flashpoint's problem. They replayed the final map. There was nearly forgot this bit. There was a fuck up in the messaging where Flashpoint said Nip have kindly offered Anonymo the option to replay the whole series or just the last map. And then Nip had a tantrum about that privately. So Flashpoint changed that to say, no, we're definitely in charge. Anyone who implies Nip are trying to pressure us is wrong for sure. Here's what really happened. And then they played the last map, Mirage. It was still unbelievably close. Nip won it 16-14. Snacks tweeted, you can see how much the packet loss was a factor. Publicly wrecked them. Device pretended to be sad, despite being on a video high-fiving and celebrating, because he is a fucking idiot and keeps digging this hole unbelievably deep. Come on, Dever, mate. And then we all just went about our business.
And then we would have... You forgot how NIP at the end then tweeted and made a public statement saying, we agree with Flashpoint's decision. We think the rematch... Oh, they didn't say anything like that. They just put all the blame on Flashpoint. Didn't say anything like, this is a good call. We appreciate this, or take our side in any way.
Yeah. So, and then it was all going so well and everyone had forgot about it. And then Flashpoint said, hey, remember that thing that happened? Here's an NFT that we're going to sell and give the money to Anonymo. And the community was outraged again because having a sense of humor in 2021 is a form of bigotry.
I thought it was funny, personally.
Yeah. I wouldn't have. I'll just say, personally, I agree with you. I definitely think it's funny, but also I wouldn't have touched it with a shitty stick. I would have left that well alone. That was just because the community just have a bee in their bonnet about everything these days.
By the way, to me, like, obviously there's so many angles we can go in on this. Like, there's the technical angle of the internet things, and then there's rule set things and blah. One thing I thought we should start with, and we can get GoMeZ involved with this immediately, is when you're in, like, one of the situations which Richard alluded to there, where, for example, Device is going off at an admin on Discord, right? In this scenario, I notice a lot of fans were lost on this because they don't understand the protocols if you're in an online match, right? They think, for example, like, well, all the players in a room, like, is it the players who talk to the admins? Like basically, from your perspective, when you've been involved in situations during like online qualifiers and stuff, like, is there like is there normally supposed to be a system like there's one person, maybe it could be you for your team, who represents your team? Do the players get to talk to the admins directly usually? How do these things get resolved behind the scenes if something happens?
Originally, it was like what you said. It was just one person, maybe the manager plus the coach. But then when they brought in the webcams, then all the players had to connect to Discord because they needed the cameras, like the camera feeds. So now everybody's in the chat. And that's when it gets a little bit crazy. Once, everyone can see what's happening. People are replying pretty fast. And I don't think it would have happened if we didn't have the webcam sort of situation and all the players weren't in the chat. So I think that's a result of, the new norm of having the direct webcam feeds in the system.
It's also because, again, because the coaches or staff can't be in the same room as the players, that they can at least communicate directly with admins, because sometimes they can't communicate even with their people in the same building as them very easily. So.
Yeah.
By the way, just as an aside, like, even though like I've got a separate rant, I've already done by the numbers, but I'll do it later when we actually talk about like the Nip offering the rematch thing, because I have a whole thing on that where like that's one of my biggest pet peeves the last few years, the idea that like players are the ones who determine how they resolve a problem. But beyond that, I want to get to this very briefly at the beginning, because this will sound like a very throwaway point to other people, but I've been thinking about this. I think this is important actually. One of the things I don't like about this is, and Richard will know this, is this all actually the idea, by the way, that someone like Device, who was the most decorated player in the game, would like basically verbally abuse as someone who's in like an admin position in this scenario, who, by the way, by their job is obligated to communicate with Device and pretty much cannot go back at the same kind of flair. I don't think that's a fair scenario. And it all comes out of the world of 1.6 and all these sports where the admin was usually a volunteer and by definition lowest on the like social hierarchy totem pole of anyone at the event except a fan, basically. And so basically they would usually be not only themselves like considered to have no status by pro players, but often they were fanboys of the pro players. And so they almost put themselves into that position of like, I'm always below you and I'm just here to like, oh, I'm just a messenger. Oh, sorry, sir, you need to join the game server now. I want us to literally, if we're going to have these stupid discussions about let's have a CSPPN. Oh, and what? And how are players being treated? How are admins being treated? That's a question I have, right? Because in my opinion, I'm not joking. I think there should literally be like a code of etiquette when you deal with an admin. Like I personally think no pro player should ever be talking to an admin. I think you should have like a representative you talk to, and then his job is to be polite, to be professional. But in any sense where a player is talking to an admin, I don't want to see a world where they're like just chewing this guy out when he has to do his job. Like, in my opinion, you should literally be on the level of like, yes, sir, no, sir, and if he asks you a pointed question, you tell him exactly what it is, because he isn't there to take your abuse, mate. This is like when people say, like, if you abuse someone who works at like the ticket office at like an aeroplane thing, you will get thrown out, of course.
Yeah,
so you aren't there to abuse that guy and as though it's his fault directly, whether or not you agree with his decision or not as a pro player.
So I don't want to like ream Device too hard, because I understand why he was mad, and also he of his own volition apologized privately and then also apologized publicly. Exactly. And like I think his apologies were really good. So I don't want to just like pile on Device too much, because I think I genuinely believe that he recognized that what he did was shitty, and you know, it's not going to do that in the future. But I will say this, like, if you said the shit that Device said in that channel to a ref in a game, like, I don't care in a sport if the ref makes completely the wrong call. You would be ejected from that game. 100%. And so here, you know, if I will just tell you straight up.
The game, absolutely.
I will just tell you straight up that if I had been in control of this situation, I would have immediately ejected him from the game and said, goodbye. You know, we're done here. The admins are being very polite with you. We're obviously trying to solve your problem. The admins are not being abusive. This is incredibly unsportsmanlike, and you need to leave right now. So, like, that was not what was done. However, that is definitely what I would have done. And, you know, probably in any kind of rematch scenario, I would have said, here are your choices, NIP. We can play a rematch of this final game, but you will play it without Device. And if you can either choose to play with Threat or a sixth member of your roster, a substitute player, or you can hold the L and we'll move on with the rest of the event. So that is the choice I personally would have made had I been in charge.
By the way, I probably should have said this before we actually went live, but like at any point during this chat, pretty much, GoMeZ, just jump in if you have a point, mate, because like we're so used to being on shows that like we're just going to fill all the space of us. If you have a point,
no worries.
We're gobshites, basically, mate.
I was going to say, I don't know, like you could say in theory that's what you would have done, but I don't know if Valve would have let you do that, because I mean you don't even register a substitute anymore. Like it's just here's your 5 players. So what, they just forfeit, I guess. Like. I think Valve would have, yeah.
I mean, I don't really care what the effect of it is. I'm just saying that he would not have been in Monty's world. He would not have been able to play in that rematch.
Sure. Because like I said, by the way,
the reaction to that would have been way worse.
Would be the end of the world. That would literally have been the end of the world.
That's fine.
Because the reason I say that is because, like as I say, pro players want more and more things. They want better treatment. They want better. Like you've been given it, guys. Like if we look at where you were at 5 years ago, you live a fucking dream life now in business class, amazing setups, like private areas to play. Can't we at least have a basic level? Like I say, I'm not asking you to kiss the admin's ass. I'm asking, how would you treat someone in a train station who's just unfortunately been mildly incompetent with the alter? Would you chew them out and tell them they're a piece of shit and you'll never work there? No. Oh, I hope you wouldn't at least. So let's at least have like a modicum of like, let's have like a base level professional respect that you have to give to admins, especially because, as you'll probably find out in this episode, if you keep watching, if you're a pro player, it's way more complicated than you think. One of the things, in fact, in this whole topic, I want to say at the very beginning is for everyone, myself included, you cannot look at topics like these and just look at them from a massive, like 1,000 miles distance as one object and just go, yep, it's obvious what you should have done. It's do it. It's always way more complicated. Like in this particular case, just the whole thing we're going to explain probably in a minute about the technical aspect of like, what was the issue? Some sort of obscure server setting, but then they were sending server logs from the ISP, but then that didn't show anything. And then what happens? Well, can you halt a game where you have no, like, that's what I mean, guys. It's like an episode. Think of like an episode of a classic like cop procedural, where at the beginning they come to this. They don't just go, "It's probably him. Just arrest him. That's it. Don't bother investigating. Don't look at like the blood work." And no, what you have to do is eliminate all the things that don't make sense. You have to establish a timeline. You have to figure out that someone's telling the truth. Like it's really, really complicated. Because I found actually in this particular case, wasn't even like a normal scenario where it's like, something fucked up in the server that's obvious, or in the game someone lagged or whatever. Like this was actually like a scenario I've never even heard of. This scenario where there's some setting on the server that specifically stopped these people from one country doing it. But I heard, for example, I mean, I'm sure someone in Fnatic must live in Stockholm. I heard no one in Fnatic was having issues. So again, even trying to do A/B testing, it was almost impossible in this scenario.
So to describe the actual issue that happened, it was as follows. So it was a anti-DDoS protection on the server on which the game was being played. And why it was triggering was because it was basically trying to limit bandwidth from one IP address, which was the NIP practice facility. Now, why this was so unusual is this protection has been on every server that FACEIT has ever used, right? And obviously, we've had teams across all Flashpoints playing from boot camps. Even as far back as ECS, they told me that they had the same protection on the server. It had never once, to their knowledge, like triggered before. So there was, I'm not exactly sure what it was about the NIP connection, but it was for some reason just their connection, right? And so the reason why, to explain why you have to play on a FACEIT server, because fans and players are very quick, oh, why can't we just play on another server? So there is anti-cheat on the FACEIT servers. So you can't just flip to a different server. The teams were kind of like fighting about which server they wanted to be on, which location for ping reasons. Apparently the Swedish server was working better for NIP, but it was like 5 ping for them and 50 ping for Anonymo. So Anonymo didn't want to play on this server. So there were other extenuating circumstances as well. There's anti-cheat on these servers, so you can't just flip to a random server that doesn't have anti-cheat. There's also and fans don't understand this, there are very, very important betting partners with every CSGO tournament that need a live GoTV feed in order to adjust odds. It's a crucial component of how the CSGO economy works. And so what happens is you have to have delays for other partners who are using the GoTV feed, and you have to keep the live feeds, only going basically to the betting partners, because otherwise you get, I'm sure we'll talk about it, what happened in the CIS RMR where people have access to the live feeds. Super dangerous for competitive integrity. We've had to do all kinds of things this year. We've had to do Twitch stream delays of like 5 minutes plus because we're afraid of stream watching, because that's literally happened. The players are always finding ways to cheat. So in this scenario, at the time it was unfolding, first off, we thought it was fixed by game 3. So, people are like, you should have delayed the match. It's like, why would we do that when we thought it was fixed? We literally thought it was fixed. You can look at NIP's Twitter. They thought it was fixed too. Now, the other issue is like we had already delayed the game by an hour. But here's the thing. We can't just trust the players. There are so many scenarios in the last year in which the players, the teams, everyone has cheated in this game in the online era that we can't, if it's the ISP issue, because here's the other thing. NIP only had one ISP, so we couldn't do a check on another ISP. They only had one ISP in their office. Anonymo had four ISPs, So most teams in the online era after a year of this should have more than one ISP. Like that's
apparently a lot of them do have like 2 or 3.
Yes,
for exactly this reason. Contingency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go.
We have 2 even in Australia. It's
Right.
it's pretty standard. 100 Thieves had multiple.
Of course.
But yeah.
I've never heard of a gaming facility or a team house that only has one. So this was shocking to me. Maybe they have a really good one. I don't know. It wasn't their fault in the end, so we can't really blame the ISP. But if you can't check, for all we know, I wouldn't put it past players to DDoS, like a team to DDoS itself in order to like get a delay if it wasn't going like and if it wasn't going the way they wanted this game to go. That is certainly a possibility. I don't trust the players and the teams, and neither do any admins at this point in time, because of all the bullshit they have pulled. The players and teams have broken the trust of the TOs. So we can't just delay matches because the players say they have bad ping when it appears, especially, we don't have proof that it's on the server. It appeared it was their ISP at first. And the whole wacky thing about this is that the fan reaction was so out of place, because at the end of the day, what happened was FACEIT could have just said, oh, it was the ISP, and walked away, and that match would have never been replayed, right? But what FACEIT did was then spend the next 8 hours the next day going over the server logs, working with NIP. They identified that the issue was them, then publicly came out and said, we fucked up. Like, that's what you want from a tournament admin. You want them to go back to realize their mistakes and then make the appropriate fixes for the future. Whereas we could have just simply said, it was their ISP, and that would have been it. And there wouldn't have been a replay, but it also wouldn't have been fair. You know what I mean? So I think what they did was actually a very good thing in terms of tournament integrity, and they're getting blasted for allegedly doing the opposite, right?
By the way, since obviously we don't have anyone from an admin of a different organization, in fact, sadly, I'll even say this right now, I actually was trying to get someone who could have been an authoritative figure from someone else, and they basically were told by ESL, don't speak about this topic, because as I pointed out to Richard on By the Numbers, mate, it was so conspicuous, the lack of industry comment on this exact issue. This is the scenario where if this was something where ESL, for example, had some standard protocol, you would, the joke is, it's like that old one of how do you know if someone's a vegetarian? Oh, don't worry, they'll tell you. It'd be like that. If every other TO did things totally different to Flashpoint, you would have known, because they'd have never shut the fuck up tweeting about it, making posts, maybe go on podcasts. You couldn't get anyone to talk about it. So maybe I can ask GoMeZ in this particular case, because he's dealt with people. Have you ever heard of anything like this particular issue? And or what do you actually think if this had been an ESL or a Blast tournament or something else? Pure speculation or based on experience, how do you think they would deal with something like this? Because obviously in this scenario, FACEIT initially didn't know if there was a problem, then waited a day, and part of it certainly waited a few days, and then they rematched the game. So what do you think would have happened if it was a different TO going? Just your own opinion.
If you're the bigger team, you get better treatment. I'm confident that's how it works. It always has worked, and it always will work.
A rematch maybe with a different TO, you think?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, no, 100%. And as to your original question, how can this happen? The part that I don't understand about the story that's been publicly told is they said they tried VPNs. Now, if some of them are trying VPNs, then the IPs are different. So I don't understand where FACEIT comes in with was detecting they're all on the same IP, because obviously they weren't if they were on VPNs.
Exactly, but that's what we tried the VPNs, and we were told that it was fixed.
Okay. So obviously they used the VPNs.
Yes.
It fixed that problem, but because it's a VPN, it's obviously just turns their traffic to shit, I'm guessing, because it's a free VPN or quite a common VPN, I guess. And that's probably a side issue and not the actual issue originally, would be my guess. But
I have no idea. I have no idea, because there's no way to verify. Maybe there is, but I'm unaware of the ways to verify what was going on in that third game. And like Richard alluded to earlier, I don't know how often this packet loss was happening. Right? Was it every round? Once in the game? I have no idea, right?
This is a really key point that needs to be hit really hard here, because again, fans are going to get lost on this. You alluded to it, but let me make it explicit. Pro players for the history of Counter-Strike, cannot be trusted to just go anecdotally off their word of what is happening in an
so
online
ridiculous.
game. If you allow that, I'm not joking, even your favorite players, the most legendary players of all time, will pull their Ethernet cable out and quickly plug it in again so it does a spike. They will lie about, like, for example, here's
You
a
could
good one,
DDoS
guys.
yourself.
What if the ping is perfect, but you claim to have really bad packet loss? Well, in that scenario, the ping looks great from the outside, but you can't know the experience. Like, basically, I've even known pro players back in the old days when online play meant nothing. They straight up said they would do this during the server finding process. If it was too bad for them, they would either, like, essentially lag their connection on purpose, like you open a bunch of torrents or something back in the day, or one of them straight up told me what I just said. He said I would just pull the RJ45 out quickly, plug it back in really quickly. It would, for a second, like, make me go sort of like, you know, like flush entity packet loss, and then I would be back on the server. I go, look, I can't play like this, I can't bloody move, and they would just get a better server. Now, if people aren't following why I'm bringing this example up, in this particular case where the team goes, it's all right, we can play on our server, they'd be doing that all the time for every match. I'm not exaggerating. Literally, a Swedish team would do that until they got from 12 to 10 ping. This is what they would do. This is what the game would become, by the way. Like, I've told GoMeZ this story before. In Quake World, the original Quake, where they still play it to this day, but it's all played by the best players are all in the Nordic region, right? So it's Finnish people playing Norwegians playing Swedes, right? And cause no joke, what they're battling over is like, am I playing on 15 ping, but you're on 11 ping? That's unfair. They go, dude, they have like 1 hour sessions where they're using these like fucking VPNs trying to get like, oh, he's down 2 ping, but you're up 3. Like, it's a nightmare. And so, like, players, and then throw in this last detail, this is a qualifier for the World Championship. This is a team in Nip's case where they just signed like a massive player. They're hoping it's going to turn. So if you imagine that, like, well, we can just trust that players are telling you, we can't. I'm sorry, we can't. We really can't. I know it sucks because you want to trust them, but you can't.
I lose faith in humanity when fans trust Counter-Strike professional players after the last year. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me? How is that a reasonable expectation from any TO?
Yeah. I mean, like, so to that point, I mean, that is a fucking tale as old as time anyway. Like, you know, lag switching, rate hacking. There's always a way to make it look like you're getting the shit end of the stick when in reality you either don't want to play or you're getting battered and you want to, like, look for the exit rematch, you know, or a player's under the weather or doesn't turn up and you have to use a stand. That's like you say, for people that came from the source scene, I think we're all just so like the online era, what's been happening this past year in the online era doesn't like phase us at all because like we saw it all
a million times.
Yeah, like
this qualifier. Yeah.
This was the bread and butter for Source for like pretty much the entirety of its existence. I mean, you have to remember, Valve didn't even do anything about the competitive integrity for that game. It was a guy called fucking Jedi who invented Z-Block, which was the consistency enforcer. Otherwise, you could just change textures in the game. You just go in, take the VTFs, and just be like, right, I'll make doors see-through then. You would just
1.6.
You would just change your value. Doors are see-through now, and I can play like this. No chance of that triggering a VAC ban either, by the way. Yeah, it like online Source was a fucking joke, and we had to rely on external parties to even just make it viable as a competitive aspect anyway. But the thing that blows my mind is this rule that Flashpoint have. That's what I want to talk about. I don't understand the rule because to me, the worst thing you do...
just to clarify, the rule you're talking about is the rule that if there's a problem, you play the game out, and it's only after the fact you appeal. You don't basically say, like, we can't continue. You just say, can I change it after the fact, right?
For me, doing that in any sport, if something's not right, you get it sorted before you play. You know, for example... say floodlights. I'm trying to think of something that's like analogous to a server in real sports, which of course can't be done. But let's go with floodlights. You need light to play, right? So let's say the floodlights at a stadium aren't working. You don't play in the fucking dark and say, well, we'll see how it goes and if, you know, if the result's too silly, we'll replay it later. No, you fucking stop. You get the lights fixed. If you can't get the lights fixed, you replay it at a later date. That's what should have happened in Flashpoint. And frankly, there's a rule that says, no, for the sake of a schedule or whatever it is, you have to play, is ridiculous, because you're always in danger when you play something of essentially validating it and creating a world where they go, yeah, we're actually going to abide by that result. There's another point I'll get on to after that. But I think it's a good juncture for GoMeZ to jump in and talk about it as a, former player manager,
Yeah.
all of that stuff. For me, if I was in charge of NIP in that moment, regardless of what Flashpoint were threatening me with, I simply would not have played until it was right.
Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind when I saw it was what happens with the map veto as well. Like, was there an option to redo the veto, or do we just what if a team was caught off guard with Mirage as the third map? You've now got a game delayed for what, 4 days, 5 days? Well, now you know what the map is. Let's go watch some footage and make sure we're up to scratch on our Mirage, because it's obvious it's going to be Mirage. So to me, that was the first thing that stood out as to why you wouldn't do it. But as for having the balls to not play, I think that would come down to the coaches and managers not being in the room. Once again, players just wouldn't even know what to do. They would literally just be like, people think because they're pro gamers, they're also pro computer operators as well. Like, half of them don't even know the basics of operating a PC. They just happen to be really good at the games.
Yeah.
it turns out
they don't even of all time, by the way.
It turns out the ability
player can't plug in a fucking mouse. They are so inept, it's comical.
But it's not even just about the tech. It's like the ability to click on heads doesn't mean that you have the critical thinking or leadership skills to navigate you through a scenario like this. But continue.
Yeah, and some teams rely on their coach and manager a lot more than others. I feel like NIP is probably one of those teams. If you look at the team before Device joined, it looked like Threat was doing a lot of the parenting type thing. They'd all spin around in their chairs and he would call the timeouts, and it seems like he was kind of running the show. And then now he's not in the room. I reckon it just would have been a bit of chaos. New guy in the roster, he doesn't know the protocols either, and I think it was just a storm sort of waiting to happen, and probably it happened to the wrong team. I think some other teams that may have been more reasonable, but other teams have shorter tempers as well. I can imagine some teams, Eastern European teams, off the top of my head, that would may have gone the other way, and South American teams as well. They're very emotional about Counter-Strike, which is fair enough, but it may not have been as political or politically correct as maybe some other teams. Finnish guys, I could imagine, would probably not have even reported it. They would have just been like, "This is fine," and just kept playing. You just don't know. It was just a team that happened to that I think that made it a lot worse than it could have been for some other teams.
Richard's point about the fact that they should have not played, essentially, if that was the rule. That's one area where I actually do think is another important point to be made, which is, even though I actually have sympathy for both teams, it sounds horrible if you NIP and you're having these problems with the internet, but no one's acknowledging it, and you have to play the game, and someone's telling you it's the first game of the World Championship quality, you must play the game. That sounds terrible. If you're Anonymo, goes without saying it's horrible. You play the match, you win the game, and then they steal the result, make you play it again, and then you lose. And then go, well, do his result. No, there's no justice in that scenario. So my problem is this, though, is that when you set it up like that, both of those parties also are responsible for both of these results that came across, because they participated and they gave their consent. The moment NIP continued to play the third and second map after they claimed they had these problems, you accepted the result. So as far as I'm concerned, if you're a NIP player watching this, you lost a series and you just got to get that life back in the tournament. As far as I'm concerned, you played on, you acknowledged that this result was going to count. Remember, logically, you can't be like, none of this counts, but I'm playing. You were playing. The second you played, you accepted the result, which happened to be a loss. You then threw a tantrum and demanded it back. And if you're Anonymo, sorry, you don't get off the hook either. When they come back to you, it was on a Sunday, I think, and they say, you have to play the rematch. You go, I don't have to do anything. I've played my game. I won my game. It always by your rules. You have to force me to do it, essentially. And listen, I understand players are going to go, but both of us would have been forfeited. Then so be it. The point is, in that scenario, you take responsibility for your you're part of it. If they forfeit you, by the way, first of all, it's a scandal in its own right. It might prompt all sorts of action by Valve, anyone, who the fuck knows. But my point is that you can't go along with it and then claim after the fact, I totally disagree with this. You don't. Well, your actions didn't say that, mate. I know it sounds harsh because I agree with GoMeZ. It's different if there's not someone in the room who can sort of like do what I'm doing now. Like, guys, we don't have to stand for this. Like, let's band together. Yeah, it's true. That's a different scenario. But I hope pros understand going forwards. You're not little kids. You can't go, but he told me to do it, and then go, oh, what the hell? It's like you participate in these matches. Because in my opinion, it's a travesty that either team were willing to actually play in these scenarios.
I want to ask Monty actually, and I know this isn't your area, and I'm not that that's going to make any difference when this eventually makes it into the fucking food supply of esports. But the why does that rule exist? It kind of feels to me not a standard rule and not anything I've sort of heard of before. And are there plans internally to change the rule? Because clearly it doesn't work.
So I will tell you why I like this rule and why I think it should have been applied here. So first off, the match was delayed by an hour before at the start of map number 1. This is a map that NIP won 16-3 and appeared to not be having consistent but intermittent issues, right? So first off, the rule exists because if you can't verify, it's not like they were like, oh, you're having problems, we're forcing the match to play. It's that we're going to delay this for an hour and we're going to check and see where the problems were. These problems were very difficult to verify. The problems were initially diagnosed as being from NIP's ISP, which again, we couldn't really check against because they didn't have a secondary ISP for us to check, right? And so what happened was like the admins were going through these processes, but the reason why the game has to be played is again because if you allow the teams to voluntarily stall or reschedule their own matches, it introduces extreme chaos and potential. It's rife for abuse is basically it. So you have to recall that, okay, so they win 16-3. They say, okay, we still have some issues. Then they VPN. Then they say the issue's solved. And then only after the third map do they say the issue wasn't solved, right? So at what point was the decision should have been to delay it, right? When the information that the admins were receiving was that the problem was solved. So it's weird because if the problem can't be identified, we can't just change matches for mysterious reasons, right? It's not acceptable. And if it appears to be on the teams and not the server's fault, then what do you do, right? So I disagree, and I think the matches have to be played because otherwise pro players will abuse it. And I am so the other people were saying, well, you know, some of the comments I got were like, okay, well, why don't you have a rule that says, okay, if the players choose to delay the match and it is discovered that it is their ISP, then they just lose the match. They forfeit the match, right? So they're basically staking that
some skin in the game on it.
They have the skin in the game. But my response to that would be, well, why would NIP ever make that decision? Because they didn't know for sure whether it was their ISP or not. So are they really going to gamble, especially after they won map 1 16-3, on a potential loss if it was their ISP that was in fact the issue? And I think it's unfair to put that burden on a team like NIP when it was in fact the tournament organizer's fault, right? Like the skin in the game shouldn't be entirely on the team, right? Especially if it's the TO's fault. So I think even that solution is unreasonable, but the games have to go on. So I think the rule in and of itself is good. And this was an extreme fringe case that, remember, when you think the issue, people forget this, thinking the issue was fixed was the biggest point that caused it not to be delayed further, right? So I don't know what would have happened had NIP said at the start of map 3, we're still having these issues. That's the big question mark. Like, would the third map have been delayed? Possibly it would have. But when the team is telling the admins that it was fixed, that's the point where it's not really the admin's fault anymore, right? And so all the blame that's being handed out, they made a reasonable decision in that scenario, in my opinion.
So my take would have just been this: like, you have allocated time, right? It's how it's always worked, to my understanding. You have allocated time to solve issues. And listen, it's a shit show if as in this case it turns out to be Flashpoint, and it's it's their error. But we've got precedent of it being tournament organizer error in the past, by the way, which we've just taken on the chin. Like someone's server not being calibrated, right? I mean, this
the routing just being shit to that one server.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. I'll bring up an example in a bit, but and it was also for the World Championship. So, I think that they have an hour or whatever it is the allotted time is, and then it's just tough shit. Shut the fuck up and play. It's the online era. You're never getting it perfect, right? And I know that sucks, and players don't like it, and they cry about it. How much of an impairment was it? Can we even say? Nope. It can't be as bad as what Nip said it was, because you physically can't play with 30-40% packet.
It was, I will say that it was,
let alone win 16-3.
It was difficult. I'm not accusing Nip of anything, because it's clear that they were suffering as a result of the tournament organizer from no fault of their own, right? So that's why, in my opinion, at the end of the day, after everything that had happened, the map had to be replayed. Because it was otherwise you're just penalizing Nip for something that wasn't their fault, right? And the game was not played under fair terms. So I think it was, given everything that happened, I think it was the right decision. I think the right decision was made. Now, like I said earlier, I would have made a different decision in which Device would not have been playing in that rematch.
Yeah.
But that would have been my personal call based on something that really had nothing to do with the technical issue, right?
The problem
go on.
I was just going to say, the problem you've got with setting rematches up as something that's viable in the online era, I mean, the idea that if something happens where one team is disproportionately affected, they can sort of appeal it. And if that is proven to be true, they're entitled to a rematch. Like, fuck. You would probably find that the average tournament would have half a dozen of these instances.
I agree with you. And again, I think that this is a very fringe case, because had the problem been persistent, then the match wouldn't have happened. But the problem was perceived to have been solved. You know what I mean? That's the key difference here.
Sure.
And then also
bring up the question though, because here's the problem. No matter what you say in that regard, I have to say I agree with the pro player sentiment when the rematch was announced, which is this happened because it was an IP that lost the game.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Listen, I know people can say whatever they want, but I just do not believe that Anonymo ever could have forced this rematch. What do you think, GoMeZ? Because I mean, like I say, anyone from the old games like Source 1.6, it was pretty famous that if you're the famous team, like if you have Forrest and Get Right on your team, you can sort of do whatever you want with the admins. They'll just do whatever you say, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. I said that earlier on. Like the bigger team always gets better treatment. I've been on both sides of the coin. I've been on lower teams and higher teams, and it's night and day, the differences. And that goes across the board. It's not just tournaments, it's everything.
Yes.
But one thing I did want to bring up is, like, we're criticizing people not having a second connection, but like, why don't we have multiple servers on different ISPs in the same cities? Like, I mean, the servers are cheap. Like, they're $20. Like, can FaceIt not, and ESL and everybody else, can we not have 3 in Germany and Frankfurt on different ISPs? Like,
I actually don't know if they do or not.
Why don't they? No, they don't. None of them do, to my knowledge. Why doesn't anyone have any redundant servers in the same location, but on a different ISP? Because the solution is like what you said. They go, oh, we'll just play in Sweden. Yeah, but that's a different city. Like, I want to see redundancy in the same cities. I mean, those costs are a lot cheaper than teams providing extra connections. Like, servers are way cheaper.
That's a good point.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think on that,
Richard?
Give that
example.
Because obviously, in this case, listen, I get it that the first people would say, listen, we would have done it for Anonymo. Like, what do you think on that, though?
Oh, I mean, listen, I don't want to call Monty out. It's never pleasant to sort of.
I didn't have anything to do with this decision.
I know, no, but I mean, because obviously, I believe you're of the opinion you think it would have been equally applied.
I mean, look, I'm just telling you straight up. You guys said earlier that it would have been a giant shit show had Device been disqualified because of the things that he said. I don't care. I don't care. Like, I would go out there, announce it myself, tank all of the aggro, because that's just not how shit's going to work under me.
Yeah.
So I have standards. If you don't meet those standards, I don't care if you are Device. I don't care if everybody in Counter-Strike fucking hates me. I understand that that's part of the job of being commissioner. You know what I mean?
I mean, for me, and I guess this will segue into a question I also wanted to ask, and I don't know how much you can say about it. But, you know, for me, it was clear that what was at play was there was definitely some political wrangling. And unfortunately, best will in the world, a small org like Anonymo, a new organization, certainly in a different country to the one that's hosting the major, they don't have the same level of pull or outrage or influence or whatever you want to call it. And I think what would have happened, and I you know, I can never be sure on this, but I think what would have happened is, had the roles been reversed, I think not only would Anonymous have been told to suck it up and get on with it, like, you know, good little kids, I think NIP would have been leveraging public pressure and perception against them in the other direction. Yeah. I don't think they would have any sympathy whatsoever for their opponents, because clearly what this was all about was showing that their new super signing was going to make them a viable team, and a viable team that could go on and win the major in Stockholm on home soil for that org. So I also know, because I was told by people at Flashpoint, that they were absolutely going spare and making all kinds of threats, which is the question I wanted to ask you. And I don't know if it's professional of you to answer it, or how much you'd be willing to answer it.
I don't know.
Answer it. Okay.
So I know that there were conversations that were occurring between NIP, Anonymo, and the Face It, like, admins and management, but I was not part of those conversations because I recused myself at the request of Valve, and it was not appropriate for me to be involved in those conversations, right? So I didn't ask questions. I just said, I'm just going to walk away from this one, you know, because that's what I said I would do, and I honor my word in those scenarios. So I honestly cannot opine on what happened in regards to that.
So I was told that NIP, in no uncertain terms, said that they were going to complain to Valve directly, and would we're even talking about, you know, if like boycotting all future Face It events of any kind.
I have no idea.
That they were also going to talk to other members of the Louvre teams, and they were going to see if they could get other teams on board with it, and basically try and leverage Flashpoint. Because one of the things NIP fans, I mean, you know, again, I think now with your NIP jersey, you get a free fucking lobotomy, it seems. All the NIP fans are going, well, what leverage do they have? Like, yeah, all right, mate, fuck me. None, obviously. Yeah, you win. NIP are the good guys for sure. But yeah, like, basically, you know, I my sources are internal to Flashpoint. I absolutely believe them. They've got no reason to lie to me. So, I mean, that's another problem in and of itself, right? It feels to me that leverage worked to some degree, and then you come circling back around to the competitive integrity question, that if leverage can work and did work, then by definition, any decision, even if it is right to the letter of the law, is not fair, because it is contingent on public pressure that exists outside of the tournament. So that was why I was so despondent about seeing the decision and seeing the replay. My heart went out for other teams immediately. I've talked about this before. There's an Israeli team called Equus that were playing in the back when it was ESL1 Rio qualifiers were underway. They played in the Middle East closed qualifier, and basically how it works is, because of the huge geographical differences and the infrastructure issues, they basically they agreed to, like, tossing a coin. So you play on one server that benefits you, one server that benefits your opponent, and they were playing camel riders from the United Arab Emirates. And basically, when they were playing on the server that benefited the Israeli team, it was the pings were kind of close together, about 30-40 difference. However, when it played on the one that benefited the United Arab Emirates team, it was 200 ping for the Israelis and like 5 for the United Arab Emirates team. And they somehow, it went like, what your map, their map, your map. It got to the decider in a best of 5 and they forfeited. Because they're like, we can't play like that for a decider. And ESL refused to budge, refused to find a neutral server, refused any solutions whatsoever. The Israeli team just got told, you got to eat shit on this. And that was that. That was their dream of qualifying for the World Championship over. So, I don't know. And trust me, they had no pressure they could leverage either. I don't think, and I think in that instance, if that was a European qualifier and that was a big name team that happened to, I think ESL would probably do the same thing Flashpoint did. But I don't think it's right. I think the online standard has always been, if you get fucked over by the internet, downside of playing on the internet. Yeah, that's just how it is.
I'm not even.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, GoMeZ. Yeah.
I was gonna say I don't even know if it's an esports issue. Like, I can see this happening in real life. Like NIP have a team of 1,000 lawyers, and they go to the judge, and Anonymo have one guy, and it's like like the and it's like exactly, and he can't handle it type thing, and like it happens in real life just as much as it happens in esports. So that's what I was just gonna make that point.
Yeah.
I will even say, by the way, since we all know you can't stop esports fans going, but in football, listen, in your beloved football, fucking England probably could have won a World Cup, you daft cunts, but Maradona was allowed to literally punch the ball on camera into the goal. They never even replayed that game, you daft fucks. He literally cheated and punched the ball in. We had to just go, well, stiff upper lip, just take that on the chin.
And then brag about it for like decades.
Literally called himself the hand of God. Yeah,
so insane to me.
Literally just go, I did it. What are you going to do about suck these nuts? Like,
I still can't believe that happened, by the way. That was like a real thing.
I'm not
all the more reason to love him. Rest in peace, you beautiful bastard. Like, what a legend.
Well, I'll do my quick rant now, because another thing that I noticed was actually where, in my opinion, this topic got completely lost in the weeds, which is, I said at the beginning that you should never come into really complicated, in this case, sometimes technical matters like this, where there's unknowns that haven't been ascertained yet, and think, well, there's an easy answer, it's just do this, and you can instantly sort of cut through the Gordian knot. It's worse than that, because fans got completely lost in this cul-de-sac of Team A offered this and Team B was willing to do that. Like, that is literally completely irrelevant to this topic. Like, I don't even want to hear that. Because as Richard says, like, when that statement goes, NIP has kindly offered it. NIP doesn't make offers. NIP doesn't run tournaments. NIP are not tournament admins. So in this particular case, I'm sick and tired of this, because it's a mixture of pro players just not even knowing what their actual role is and being like over entitled. But worse than that, fans propping them up and going, yeah, they're the pro player is always right. Oh, if Nico knows how to click ahead with an AK, he must also know the correct decision to an incredibly complicated, fucking nuanced admin situation. Like, listen, if you're a pro player, it doesn't matter if you're a device or if you're a nobody that was never anyone. You don't make offers on servers. You don't say, well, I agree to do something else, like have a rematch, or I agree to play on a server that none of us actually have in the tournament, or I agree to play under bad. You don't agree or make offers in any way. The admin makes all the decisions. All you do, as I said earlier, is you answer his questions, you give him the information he needs, he makes the decision, and once he's made the decision, you're absolutely within your rights, publicly and privately, by the way, to say, I don't agree with the decision, I think so. But it's irrelevant at that point in time. You have no control over it, because, by the way, if we allow that, you're going to get even worse examples of this abuse. Because I'll tell you what, the last thing I ever want is a scenario like this. And let's imagine it was another Swedish team playing against NIP, and it's some young players. And then all of a sudden you have like legendary people like Device saying to some young player, well, come on, just play on our server that we've got. Like, I never want to exist in that scenario. We're talking about a World Championship qualifier here, guys. Like, players should have zero input, in my opinion. That's way beyond their bounds.
Especially because, again, it's a scenario that is rife for abuse. Oh yeah, why don't we just go play on we DDoSed ourselves. Let's play on this server that doesn't have anti-cheat on it, or that we have live GoTV links to, right? It completely compromises the competitive integrity. And also, these players are so delusional, like, they don't even understand how the CSGO economy works. Like I said, there are reasons that we have to play on specific servers. Reasons related to money regarding gambling sponsorships. Do you know who survives off of gambling sponsorship? the teams, the
Esports.
TOs, CSGO Esports. So these guys are like,
actually.
let me just undermine the entire way that we are getting our salaries paid here on our team. It's completely absurd. Like, we can't do that. We can't just change servers to some open server on a dime. We're not a bunch of people, it's not your friends who are just trying to find the best ping on a server to play on. It's not a friendly match. There are so many layers that of infrastructure that are just, it's the iceberg below the water. You guys don't even know the names of these companies that are the ones who are distributing data to the betting partners. So what happens is these companies, for example, pay tournament organizers to get access to the GoTV servers live, so that then that information, they contract with the betting company so that they can feed that information from the API, so that the betting companies can actually make their odds, right? So you have to think about all of these things and how the entire ecosystem within CSGO works. But because the players don't know this and the fans don't know this, they just demand that you would go on a different server that could be compromised with wall hacks or aimbots or who knows what's going on there, right? You can't do it when it's not in a controlled environment, period.
I
Or to
also
some random-
love...
I was just
No,
going to say, some random could have the Archon to your server.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
and he can just Archon stats, he can get info. Like, you definitely can't just use your own private server. No chance.
I can't lie. There is a part of me would love to see, just like, we should just delete this episode, let them do this. And then when you go on a random server in like an RMR, some fucker with like just setting all like your gravity settings, like a 1.6 that players just flying around. Like, and apparently fans would just be going, this is fine. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with this. Yeah.
One that spawns a tank.
By the way, you do realise, fans, that is also the logic you're using when you say they agreed. By your logic, we could actually say, you know what, fuck it, for the last map of the series, let's make it full. We'll play with half gravity. But we both agreed, so the two teams agreed. What's the problem? Get out the way, you dusty, stuffed up old admin. Like, 'cause I want to ask actually GoMeZ about this, because GoMeZ actually, I think if he was back, like, I know that your team was at the event. I was referencing the story on By the Numbers of why you can't allow teams to do this, of that famous one where I think it was iBuyPower, right? Where it was the one where Hiko from Team Liquid, they were at the Brazilians in Luminosity were trying to tell him he had to replay the game because like they wanted to agree to that because that cable got kicked out of that tournament, right? And famously, the scenario a lot of people don't know is they claim, because it's just Brazilian fans say this, Hiko's like a piece of shit and wouldn't agree to it. No, what Hiko said famously was, I'm just going to go with the admin's decision, because he knew, by the way, the admin actually technically had to rule that like you didn't restart the round or whatever, because that was what the rules were. But what they now like Fallen Fur type guys were trying to do was they were trying to use this public influence of like, well, you know, for the fans, we should replay it or whatever. They were trying to do that and get him to just agree, like, yes. And then if they agreed, the tournament admins would have rolled over and just let it happen. So, like, this would happen a lot, wouldn't it, if you allowed this to be the case with four players,
and just
right?
to add to that, any fucking admin that says to the players, oh, hey, you guys can decide amongst yourselves, or, you know, do you want to do that? Do you want to be sporting about it? Fuck you, brother. You're a piece of shit. You're a fucking piece of shit. Any admin that does that should be fucking disqualified immediately from ever working in an admin capacity ever again.
What was so funny to me, like, look, I didn't want all of the CIS like RMR nonsense. Like, I hate to see it. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want that to go, all of that to go down. But in some ways, what happened there really vindicates a lot of the decisions that were made by Faceit and Flashpoint, such as, here's why we couldn't just switch to a random server without anti-cheat or without any kind of GoTV delay, guys. We couldn't just do that because of these reasons. You know, the entire nature of that RMR is unfortunately called into suspicion now, right? You know, I was shocked when I saw that the teams had voluntarily agreed to divide RMR points in that 5th place match.
Wow.
Let me give you a hint here, guys. You don't get to decide where the RMR points go. That's Valve's job. You can't just manipulate RMR points, which is why Valve had to step in later and say, no, you are going to play this. I was shocked they even had like the balls to go out there and say, yeah, it's our choice. We get to decide where the RMR points go. Like, I would never presume to decide that, to make that decision. Holy shit. The arrogance, dude.
It was going to actively fuck over a team they had a legitimate grievance with as well.
I know. But it's just wild to me, like, because the way that I would approach the RMR is like, we are supplicants of Valve and the Valve circuit, and thank you, Mr. Valve, for giving us the RMR. But ultimately, everything that is done must be approved by Valve, right? And the RMR points are much bigger than one RMR event. They're much bigger than one tournament organizer. It's not our circuit, okay? So I would never presume to like divide up RMR points. So I was actually like floored when I saw that. I was like, "There's no way Valve approved that."
just to move us along at a brisker pace, because I know that the CIS RMR by Epicenter is of it. Yeah, well, there's a couple more things that we do need to talk about in relation to Flashpoint.
Sure.
And the first one is obviously the overtime rules, which generated a little bit of drama. Basically, it was discovered that the overtime rules that were traditionally used at Valve events were the one where you have $10,000 start money. At Flashpoint, they were using $16K. And there were 3 overtime maps that this impacted, funnily enough, including the Anonymo NIP one. So I demand a rematch of the rematch, sir. But yeah, this was changed partway through, and I just wanted to ask Monty about that and what happened there, and whether or not you think that's a big deal, and whether or not, as some people were saying, it should be disqualifying for Flashpoint. It was such a critical major error.
I do think it was a major error. I think so previously, I think why this occurred was that in previous, again, I was not part of this process with this event. I do know that we decided to use 16K for previous Flashpoint events because I think it's better, in my opinion. And I know Duncan also was part of those conversations previously. And I think that it was just not changed on the servers for this event. And then the mistake was discovered and it was changed. But yes, that's just on Flashpoint.
Were there internal discussions about replaying the games that were affected?
I did not hear any, but maybe, I don't know.
Because I kind of felt that the genie was out the bottle at that point.
Yeah, but the problem is there was no one angry in Swedish shouting about anything. So somehow it just didn't really get to the top of the priority pile, So
if there's a lapse in competitive integrity and device doesn't make a sound, did it happen?
Exactly.
It's the old philosophical question, isn't it?
If you don't have to worry about a former legendary player's firm kicking your head in, then at the next LAN, then is it really a concern for the admin? That's my question. Philosophical to the end, By the way, 2 things I'll just say before we move on from this topic, because I may as well get it out now on the Flashpoint thing, is I said this to Richard on By the Numbers, so I'll reiterate it here in case people are only going to watch this one, because obviously it was a few weeks ago we did that. That's actually one of the saddest things about this whole situation. I know Monty publicly came out and said he wasn't going to be involved with the decision and stuff. This is a moment where, not just for the obvious reasons, I'm actually really glad I wasn't involved with Flashpoint, because 2 things that I have always wanted to see improved in Counter-Strike is, 1, this whole thing with admins where players just pop off and think they can just do whatever the fuck they want and basically treat the admin like he's some fucking low-level waiter in a fancy restaurant who they can just get fired at a whim, if he brings the wrong meal or whatever. I hate that, because I've always just thought not only is it just bad for the scene, look at what atmosphere it's going to create where that guy's going to feel like his job isn't valued at all, but even worse, as I alluded to before, I had to go through over 10 years of knowing that big name players are abusing their position and getting decisions their way and getting rules changed or getting extra consideration that no one else would get. And as I've said in the past, when I used to sit at home on a HLTV server, typing a fucking lurpus, talking shit on all the players that we weren't at the LAN with or whatever, we used to always say whenever these incidents happened, one day, I hope there actually are admins who have the balls to tell the players no, or if you do this, you're disqualified, or I'm not going to, it's in the rules, that's what it is. It doesn't matter who you are. You could be the biggest name player in the world. These are the rules. And I will say, as far as I can tell, some of the people like Mehow from ESL, they do seem like they actually do that. They actually have finally met that standard. So I just found it sad, because I understand there's certainly more context that I didn't myself know. We found out from Monty here about the way the decision was made and what NIP was doing and how that led them to believe the game could still be played. But I hate the idea that, again, people like Face It, who've been around all of CSGO doing these admin things, they're not beginning people, guys. That's why as soon as there was a massive issue, I knew it had to be more complicated than some simple thing that you could ascertain in 5 minutes. These people are experts at like
they're professional. This is their jobs, guys. They're professional. Like they get paid a full-time job to do this.
So my problem in that particular case is I don't want admins to be like essentially automatically assumed to be incompetent and wrong by players or anyone else in the community. If they are wrong, they can carry a can for it and they can apologize and take the responsibility. Yes, but like people have to understand, it's actually a very important job. This is like, imagine, I know no one does respect the referees in sports, etc., but the sport cannot run without them. It would be chaos without them. So, like, it's a job where I hope pro players actually understand that, like, this isn't just about, like, bagging on pro players. It's that they're out of touch with these admins. They don't understand that, like, essentially you can't make it like it's 10 years ago and you're just reaming a guy out because you're upset about something. You being upset doesn't make up for the like lack of professionalism. You have to be a professional.
And also, thank God that this doesn't happen more often in esports. I mean, the admins generally do a very good job in the industry these days. And also, for all of you people who watch traditional sports out there, aren't you happy that there isn't like a billion like refereeing scandals every playoffs or every season? Like, traditional sports are a million times worse. Like, let's all be grateful that this happens with such, irregularity within the esports scene, because we are not really bound by human decision making very much, because the game sets the rules for us.
Yes.
Right? With very few expectations. There isn't missing a call or like fucking up a call like there is in sports. Constantly, every game, something is missed or there's a mistake that's made by the refs. We don't have to deal with that. Thank God.
Yeah. So just last question about the Flashpoint stuff, because you alluded to it on Twitter. I mean, for me, one of the things that I've just become increasingly like disenchanted with the Counter-Strike scene in general, and just esports at large, is kind of like the way that it used to be, sure, you always played favorites, but there was some sort of big picture awareness. Certainly in Counter-Strike, where it felt the community used to be a bit more mature. But now it seems to be that people genuinely root for failure without, of certain entities, without actually thinking through what would come next. So, in the instance of Flashpoint, me and Duncan have dunked on Flashpoint many times. I'm sure we'll do it again. But equally, I can see the virtues and the importance of new leagues and ladders and tournament organizers and companies and sponsors and investors and all of that coming into the space. And yet it seems to me the standard Flashpoint is held up to compared to other TOs is ridiculous. And it's predicated on, as far as I can tell, two things primarily. One, Thorin used to work for Flashpoint, and morons who think they're entitled to an opinion when they don't even look up like just basic facts before they open their stupid fat fucking mouths think Thorin still works there. And two, you work there, Monty, and that, as far as I can tell, is Flashpoint's greatest crimes.
I don't know, man. Like, I think I stand with the decision that FaceIt and Flashpoint made in regards to this, given the information that was available. I think the decision was reasonable. Obviously, I share some of your concerns clearly about the standard that it sets, but I think this was such a fringe case that it's not really likely to happen again. And I think for the most part, Flashpoint 3 went very smoothly. I think Flashpoint is doing very interesting things with production that we just don't see from other TOs. Like, we again sent all of the camera crews out to the team facilities or the player houses so that you actually get live interviews in an online era, right? We're the only one doing like that kind of hype video stuff. We do skits, like we do fun stuff. We brought in people who weren't on site to kind of cut in and do telestration analysis for us, like Alan. Like, we found a lot of creative solutions to problems during the pandemic. And am I frustrated that we've never been able to run Flashpoint the way that we would have liked because of the COVID pandemic? Yes. But at the same time, I think we're doing things that no other TO is doing. And I think that it pushes the entire scene forward. Like, in the same way that ESL and Blast push us forward to do things, like, I love Blast production. I think Blast is excellent. But I also want to make an excellent product. And outside of this one incident, I think the whole tournament was pretty smooth overall and offered some good content and some really high quality matches of Counter-Strike. And, I hope people enjoyed it. That's it. But I don't understand why, we're held to this different standard, and like even by the teams themselves, which is weird, because if I'm a team, I don't like teams. Do you want an ESL monopoly? Is that what you think is good? Do you think you're going to make money from that scenario? No.
Well, I mean, they sort of think, yeah, actually.
Well, okay, but it's because they have competition. As soon as the competition goes away, you think ESL is going to be so generous? No, they're not. That's just business. That's just business, not shade at ESL.
You can like this, Richard, because I'm now going to reveal something I was told within Flashpoint about Nicola Lyholm. Oh, the fuck. Isn't that rich, Nick? Hey, both of us can play that game. By the way, I've got fucking silos you don't even know about, motherfucker. But okay, here's what I heard within Flashpoint. You'll like this. Even Nicola Lyholm supposedly actually acknowledges privately that the battle between Flashpoint and ESL did get them a better Lufa agreement.
Yeah,
even the devil gives us a fucking due.
Do you think that ESL would have offered money to the Lufa agreement teams, or as much as they did, without the existence of Flashpoint? Of course not. That's not a set, like, it's not throwing shade. It's just not a rational business decision. It's for a tournament organizer. Like, we probably wouldn't have either if I wouldn't have if I was in that same scenario, right? So it has been good for many of the teams. It has been good for the players, for the teams in particular, that there has been competition, and I continue to believe that is true.
Because what made this perfect, by the way, and we can obviously segue to the CIS stuff now, is basically the timing of this, because it happened with Flashpoint, and then obviously it was like, a week later that now we had all this CIS RMR stuff. And you guys in the community, you fucking played yourselves so hard because you spunked your entire load on Flashpoint device style, saying like, you should never host a bloody event. Valve should ban you. They should be removed from the earth itself. Like, just going so over the top. Then we moved to another RMR in which, by the way, if you asked me, listen, ignoring like the online, offline component, if the major was played tomorrow and it was played online, I'm just going to use that to make it a reasonable context. The CIS RMR has more favourites to win the major than the EU one does right now. Like, that in theory should be the most important RMR in the context that we need the top teams to get to the major to make the major as awesome as possible. So the idea that when you look at the CIS RMR, you're like, just don't really care. It's like, well, then you don't care about the issue itself. Because like I say, this isn't like, but I'm not from CIS. No, we're talking about World Counter right now. They're the best teams in the world. Gambit, fucking Na'Vi, Virtus Pro. Like, these are the best teams in the game. Like, that, if you actually cared about these topics and not just cause fuck Flashpoint and Monty and Thorin, then you should really care about this one. Like, this one, by the way, had way more offenses than we're going to get into.
I'm gonna make an analogy here, okay? I'm gonna make an analogy. So, this situation is like when the U.S. was involved in Vietnam and just bombing the shit out of everything, and like questionable if the fans are like the U.S. in this scenario. You guys just came and you just bombed the shit out of Flashpoint, right? You just bombed it everywhere. And what happened after the Vietnam War was that a lot of they started bombing Cambodia, right? And because the insurgents, like the northern Vietnamese, were going through using Cambodia, they didn't care about the border. So you start bombing Cambodia. This causes massive displacement in Cambodia. And then here comes Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. And the U.S. at that point is like, well, everybody's tired of war, so we're just going to let this ride, And it's like, no, that was the actual righteous conflict, guys. You missed the one you should have been involved in because you were so involved in this dumb bullshit instead.
So, GoMeZ, just before we talk about Pol Pot some more, are there any final thoughts about Flashpoint you want to just chip in and say before we move on to the CIS stuff?
Do we miss anything? Is there any obvious angle like that we haven't brought up?
I just think in general, all the tournament organizers get a pretty rough stick. I think if ESL made a mistake, there would have been an equal amount of people. There would have been different people, but it would have been just as many, calling for Carmack's head, even if he had nothing to do with it. Like, people just associate, I guess, like, figureheads with different companies, and if you don't like that person, if it was Blast, like, I'm sure Nicola Nyholm still would have copped it, even though he probably has absolutely nothing to do with it.
I know he just fars and all, yeah,
exactly. But like, I think like it's just people are just, I mean, they're just not happy with the product, and I don't think that's really justified. I think that all the top tier ones are doing a pretty good job in general, and people just want to complain about whatever. It's like politics. I picked a side, and now that's their side for life. You're either ESL or you're not, or you're Flashpoint or you're not. And as soon as they do something wrong, it's like, haha, like retweet all the tweets and
Oh yeah, don't worry. Listen, I'll tell you right now, and I know some of these guys. Even though in this particular instance they would want you to understand how difficult a scenario it was and how it was unfair. Listen, they would have done that little sneak dick monkey fucking retweet of like a comment like me bagging on ESL or something if it was ESL. They'd do that cheeky little. Mick would do his fucking little retweet. He'd get one in there. Or the shadow likes. He'd less people are going to check those. Like obviously everyone in the that's just the industry bullshit, isn't it? The tribalism. Yeah. Of course, people would do that. I agree.
Yeah. It's a Reddit thing too. Like, let's make a controversial topic to get the likes, to get the karma.
Yeah, but see, you know what we would do on this show is that if this had been ESL's problem, we would have just invited somebody from ESL to come on here and had a reasonable fucking conversation. That's why this show is important, guys. This show is very important because this is the only place you're going to get reasonable ass takes on esports drama. Because we wait.
It's the only place you might ever see me on a live stream with Carmack in this fucking incarnation, boys. Not the only chance you've ever got.
Like, so. I don't give a shit. Anybody is welcome into the arena here. You know what I mean? Like, the point is for people to be able to have a platform to discuss things in a rational and in-depth manner.
I mean, I'll just add as well to GoMeZ's point. It's like. One of the comments I read all the time on the CSGO subreddit, especially these days, is, wow, it feels like there's a drama every 5 minutes. That's you, dickhead.
I know, isn't it?
That's you, dickhead. You're the one that sees the thing happening, puts it on social media, right? Tells all your mates, to fucking upvote it, shares it on your Discord. You're the one who drives the conversation and comments in it 50 times. All of you upvoting it and put it on the front page. Half of this shit don't need to be discussed. Half of this shit ain't a big deal. Like, did we really need 5 fucking threads about Flashpoint cutting away at the end of a round when someone's saving a gun? Did we need that? Probably not, guys, but it was a big deal, wasn't it? Because what you do, you don't care about the principle, you care about the drama, and you care about dunking on people you don't like while promoting people you do like.
The floodgates were opened after that, weren't they? It was like, on Flashpoint, it's actually you are, not you're on the fucking, like, all right, mate, just everything, isn't it? Just everything that's wrong.
I literally saw someone make a thread, right? They were so dumb. There was a bit where they were like playing like almost like outtakes from like James Bardolph, like for humor purposes.
Yes.
Somebody made a thread going, Flashpoint have just hot mic'd James Bardolph. Listen to all the outrageous things he's saying. And it's like, it's not a hot mic, dickhead, is it? It's like the whole, anyone who thinks it is as well. It's like, fucking hell. If he ever sees a magic show, that guy, it's going to blow his mind. He saw a woman in her. He's going to go mental. He's going to go mental. Please. Yeah, please. I've witnessed the murder. Like fucking absolute cretin. So anyway, I
was gonna say, it's a free product, by the way, as well. Like, this is entirely free. You don't have to pay a cent to view this. And then it's like you cut for like 2 seconds, and then there's 6 threads about it. And yet my local TV provider does this, daily, weekly.
Right.
Whatever.
Literally a free product. I know it.
Yeah.
So, we'll get on to the CIS RMR, which is like something out of the esports dark ages. Basically, it's a tournament that's been essentially compromised from start to finish. You've got the initial issue that the people hosting it own a team that were in it. And that team just so happened.
To be fair, that's true of Flashpoint as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I was going to add that caveat, but it's good of you to address that. And yeah, probably should be disqualifying for both companies, in my opinion. But I think we've just made peace with conflict of interest in esports. I think on some fucked up level, we acknowledge that without it, we just don't exist. So we just put up with it. So
it's like Australian football.
The vibe me and you always get when we bring it up is there's people who are just sort of like, look, we all know, stop bloody going.
Yeah, I know.
Stop rocking the boat. That's like the vibe I get from people in the industry. Like, I'm trying to fix the industry. Like, just fucking
we all know there's a little man behind the curtain, but we just really like Oz. We think it's a great society, So anyway, so there was that, and that was obviously Virtus Pro. Virtus Pro did did happen to get a bunch of favourable draws, seemingly. Obviously, I'm not accusing them of anything, but I couldn't even make the allegation if the ownership didn't exist. Conflict of interest 101, ladies and gentlemen. Then, early in the tournament, DDoSing started occurring, which, as anyone can tell you, should be profoundly difficult in this day and age for all the things that we've
been for half a decade, has it?
Yeah, it's like 2013, 2014, the skins era all over again. Number of DDoS attacks in games that seem to involve Gambit a lot, but generally, whenever a favourite was playing an underdog, I wonder if betting was driving this. Now, the problem you had with the DDoSing as well is almost certainly someone with access to the player IPs, so i.e. from in the allegedly hermetically sealed competitive environment, has leaked those, it'll probably become abundantly clear why that might have happened in a bit. Then we had a team accused, let's say, of cheating throughout. They seem to be looking at something, right, while they were playing and in bizarre situations. Yes. That was when the camera feed was working. A lot of the time it wasn't. It's a requirement, by the way, in an RMR to have a camera feed for all of the players. I know, I just worked one, and the only tech pauses we had at that event related to that. You have to have them working. They didn't seem to care too much about that. Then you had zero competitive integrity protections as far as I could tell. There was no anti-cheat. I don't think you need one. I don't think it should be disqualifying to not have your own anti-cheat client. An anti-cheat is a sophisticated piece of software. Not everyone can afford to develop them. So that's fine. But, maybe something to think about for future RMRs.
I mean, you could license someone else's anti-cheat, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, sure. Easy anti-cheat or, whatever it is. Or a direct competitor, but if they would be willing to do it. I think I've seen ESL actually lend wire out to some people in the past. They didn't record player communications. It's an area fraught with peril, sure.
Like the coaching thing, obviously relevant.
GDPR and all that stuff. So maybe that's not a big deal. But they didn't record POV demos, which is staggering to me. In a tournament of this stature, there are no.
If people don't understand, by the way, one of the main problems in terms of players getting accused of cheating is that it comes from a GoTV rendering of what they're doing in the game, which I believe, off the top of my head, aren't they like 32 tick? And obviously people want like 128 tick as like the professional standard in Counter-Strike. So what you're saying there is the demo basically is downscaled from what the actual actions are. And so the most famous example ever I'll use, because it's one that in theory was shown not to be a problem, was the one where Fallen was playing an SK on cobblestone and he did a scout shot, and because of how it like compresses the data to not have to use as much space, it made it look like he just like went along and up like that, but that was actually because it rendered like a diagonal move as like an along and an up basically. So the point here is, if you watch the demo as all the maniacs do, they watch that demo like it's the fucking Zapruder film and they're like brrr. See, look at this frame. It's like, but you're not actually watching what happened in the game. So what point Richard's making is, with no POV demos, you're actually opening the door to almost anyone getting accused of cheating in the game. Whereas if you can show the POV, looks nothing like that, then instantly the problem's gone in there.
Then it was revealed by a Forza player called Zorte that the GoTV relay had there was a GoTV relay in existence for all games that had zero delay, that was passworded. And he only found this out when playing a game because he noticed what he described as Chinese guys sitting there watching their match. I'm happy to explain in a moment why that's fucking outrageous. But then on top of all of that, I just got told today, literally in preparation for this show, by people who worked on that Epicenter broadcast, that in no way was that GoTV relay with 0 seconds delay, even though it was password protected, in no way was that kept under wraps, like under lock and key. That stream was given out to every caster that worked the event, every admin that worked the event, and just various other people around the broadcast side of things. So in other words, and all the admins. So in other words, this highly privileged piece of information that really should be going out to a very limited number of people, your betting data partners, the people running the tournament, and that's about fucking it,
Also,
literally
other
have been
broadcast
shared.
partners. So, like, so I to describe where this usually goes is like if there are alternate language broadcast partners that are operating productions like that, that would go there potentially. But you could also send them a delayed feed, and it probably wouldn't matter that much because the way you, I'm pretty sure the way it works. I could be wrong about this, but for example, we are delaying our stream by 5 minutes. But if we give somebody a delayed feed and they just broadcast it instantly, then it should be happening at basically the same time. Right.
Right.
So that also eliminates that problem potentially.
And so basically, in my opinion, given that it is compromised on not one level and not in one match, but all matches on multiple levels, for me, the entire RMR, the only way you can have any form of integrity within the circuit now is to replay it.
I think you have to replay that entire tournament as well.
The whole thing's rotten.
And by the way, also,
But
what's
that's
even
not
more
gonna
wild
happen.
is that Perrymatch, who's one of the biggest betting partners in Russia, had to refund all of the bets on the match, which that tells you a lot.
By the way, they had the most hilarious possible way of saying it in the tweet, because what they said was this: no accusations, just a gift. And as I said to Richard, just think, right, I won't cast aspersion on Paramatch particularly because I don't know them directly, but essentially we're saying a betting company saw a load of people bet on presumably the favourite, lose money, and then went, we're not saying anything, but just have your money back. Like, what the fuck is your business model then? Like, that literally is your business model. So all I'm going to say is, if you're a fan, I don't think there's even like you can surely read between the lines on that one. By the way, one thing I want to ask GoMeZ about, because again, I want to just get like a contrast or a corroboration depending on which he goes with, right? What I said earlier, where when Richard said there's people have been DDoSed, like, dude, that's something I haven't heard of being vaguely relevant for literally like half a decade or something. Like, I'm thinking of like the bad old days, like 2014, 2015, when, you know, like real matches in like online tournaments would be delayed in the upper bracket final or whatever. Like, as far as I knew, that wasn't even really an issue anymore for players. Like, is it in this scenario? Do you ever hear about it happening anymore? If it happens, would you agree with Richard that it's just like you've been too loose with the security of the IP or something? What would you say to that, GoMeZ?
I haven't heard of it happening at all in the last 4 years. 2016, I reckon, was probably the last time. But it can happen very easily. I don't want to. Fuck it, I'll just say it anyway. When pro players join these deathmatch servers, they're owned by kids or whoever. Like, we don't know who owns these servers. They join the one with the lowest ping, and it's got the most people in it. You know, it's got 30 players. I'm going to join that one. If you own that server or you're an admin on that server, and often you can buy it, you can buy the admin because that's how they make the money, the servers. You can just do a console command, Archon status. It'll just bring up all the players in the server, their Steam IDs, and their IPs. You know,
as a leak, obviously, yes.
Yeah,
and these are where people are practicing.
VoIP, certain types of VoIP servers, if you're an admin as well, and you connect to them. TeamSpeak's the big one. TeamSpeak is what ravaged the ESEA Premier now, of course. ESEA Premier playoffs that they just had. That was DDoSed in Oblivion as well. Again, because it was just small NA teams, no one seemed to give too much of a fuck about that. But basically, their entire playoffs were compromised because someone, for the lulz, literally leaked all the IPs of several players across several teams, not even for any rhyme or reason, as far as we can tell. Like, literally did it because they thought it'd be hilarious. And
I must admit, it must have been an issue at some point, because I think the last 2 tournaments ESL ran when we were in NA still, so maybe New York and Cologne, we'll call it, or Beijing. They tried to get us to use VPNs and join their specific TeamSpeak and not let us use our own. Yeah. We did it in the end because we used a LAN TeamSpeak that no one has access to because it's LAN, it's closed down. And we only wanted to use that one because of no delay. You know, we were no risk at all of our TeamSpeak being leaked because it was a LAN one that I create on the day and it gets deleted and recreated daily. And it's on a LAN network, so no one's getting access to that. But
as you can see, that is the type of protection you have to take. Unfortunately, the reason why IPs generally get leaked is people who want to fix matches or heavy bettors want to have the ability to get the bets cancelled at any time. And how it works in esports betting, for those who don't know, for those who never placed a bet, if a game is cancelled due to DDoS activity, all bets are refunded, so nobody loses essentially. And that's been standard practice across all these betting sites. So what heavy bettors and match fixers want is they pay to get the IPs, and then they have them on standby, because if someone's not playing ball, or if there's a win coming their way that's going to cost them money, they deploy the botnet, and the bets get refunded. And that was what was that's been happening in CSGO since the skins era, and I'm amazed it isn't more prevalent, frankly, in the cash era, but certainly in tier 2, tier 3, certainly in Asia and the CIS regions, you will see a lot of DDoSing happening at lower levels for that reason.
When I saw the rematch thing, I thought it was just a loyalty grab, because like they're fairly new into the scene in the region. I'm not sure if it's been a rebrand of something else, but to my knowledge, they weren't around 12 months ago under that name anyway. And I'm just wondering if they were trying to get more people to come to their side by offering these sort of looser terms.
There's
like,
something
that match
there, mate. There's something there that I'll just intimate it and let it dangle. But Paramatch are new, and they have come into the space, and they are the official sponsor of Epicenter, the official betting sponsor, and they sponsor a couple of esports teams. They sponsor Fnatic, I think. And it just felt to me that it was almost like a show of solidarity, because Virtus.pro were one of the affected teams with the Akuma match. And obviously, you've got a business relationship with the S-Force Holdings that own Virtus.pro. I kind of feel, and this is based on nothing, there's no evidence. I haven't seen an email or had anything leaked to me. I just kind of felt it was more about that there was going to be this full court press, because Na'Vi and VP had been negatively affected by this Akuma team. And so returning bets and intimating that there was something untoward helped strengthen their position.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, if you bet with Betway, for example, and your match didn't get refunded, your bet, didn't get refunded, and your best friend bet on Perimatch and he gets his money back, well, you know where that guy's going to bet his next one, because it's perceived that the Perimatch are like understanding of the industry, and maybe that match was sketchy, and like you can get your money back, and they're totally above board and fully legit. Like, I wonder if it was a bit of just a publicity grab to burn the money that they would have.
I think that's a good read too. I think, but yeah, certainly. I guess. Do you want to get into the cheating allegations then, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, right. Well, I'll wait. I'll go last, I guess.
Do you want to describe what the allegations are first?
Explain what the situation is then.
So, sure, basically, as I said earlier, what happened was during the Akuma matches. So, Akuma come out, they play their first game. It's against Gambit. They have a super close defeat, including they took like Gambit to double OT or something on the first map and then lost 16-13. And everyone's going, oh, wow, isn't the CIS region so strong? Look at this guy, Sensei. He's dropped 50 kills. Wow, these guys will be certainly a team to watch moving forward in the CIS RMR. How right you were. And yeah, then they play, I think it was Na'Vi next, and they 2-0 Na'Vi, and they 2-0 them in a fashion that Na'Vi can fuck up a cup of coffee, let's be real, but at the end of the day, they managed to avoid Simple or pre-fire Simple. He's completely neutralized, the best player in the world across 2 maps. So people are scratching their heads saying, well, what's going on here? They then go and play Virtus.pro, and they 2-0 them as well. And everyone's like, well, what the fuck's going on? So people start looking at the streams, and lo and behold, it just looks like in inexplicable situations, one player in particular, that Sergey's guy, but there was others, they keep doing this thing where they're looking up and they're moving and like, and they're playing still. And it's in clutch situations usually. And it's like, yeah, listen, I'm dog shit at the game, but I'd be more dog shit if I played like that. Fucking hell, what you doing? You do not stare at your radar in clutch situations for that length of time. And I had a number of players, not just CIS ones, because they've got a vested interest in all this shenanigans. I had several top players before I did by the numbers yesterday. You know, people who've been to majors, competed at majors, what they thought about it, and they said won't commit to saying anything publicly. But yeah, he's looking at something that you shouldn't be looking at in that situation. There's no way. So those are the cheating allegations as it's been laid out. And so people are saying that they had access to radar, or maybe they were using that GoTV relay we just talked about. Or
Those are the two things that I thought of first, but then I've started to think about it more. It could have even just been a private stream. Like the guy could have just been Discord screen sharing him, as the thing, and there'd be no logs for that. Because I thought like the whole time, I'm pretty sure the GoTV logs, the IPs that connect to it, you could just check, did their LAN, connect to.
Yeah, that's what I said. There's no way they would be dumb enough to use the GoTV, because if Valve come forward and say, we want to see all the GoTV logs, then it's going to be there and you just bang to rights.
Yeah, but it could have been a screen. I mean, the technology now is so easy. Like we're using it right now. Like the Discord screen share is like
the one-click Discord streaming is super effective, right?
Yeah. And one thing that I've just come to realize in my new role here is with League of Legends, they use the webcams, but they face the screen. They're not using them for broadcast. They make them set them up sort of near their, I guess, elbow, and aimed at their screen, so they can see what their screen looks like at all times.
Right.
That would solve some things, maybe.
Yes.
You'd have to
stop someone potentially having a setup where you could see the radar of the other person, all this cheat.
Right? Yeah. You would see actual cheats. You would see little things on second monitors. You'd see quite a bit. Maybe that's something we need to look at. I haven't really thought it through, but when I joined LoL and they told me, make sure your players have got their cameras facing the monitor, and I'm like, surely you want to see the heads for the production? They're like, no, don't care about that as much. We want to see who's, what's on their screens, and making sure they're not cheating and making sure the correct players playing. That would seem to be a big concern in League of Legends. And my reply to that was, well, who are these better players? Like, can I sign them instead?
That one does seem kind of stupid.
Who are these people that could possibly play? But so I don't know. Maybe we could look at that for a tournament or two, just to see what people are looking at. I don't know. I don't know what he was looking at. It came out later. I think Chad and Chris J, I think, said there's a bug with the radar and the bomb, which is like. Apparently that's been in the game. I think Chad said Yam originally told him, and Yam was in our team in 2015. So like, if that's been in the game for 4 years, that's an interesting bug that's lasted the entirety of competitive Counter-Strike.
Not surprised it was Yam that found it, not Ricky, because of course he would have never seen fucking anything on the radar, would he? There, whatever. Too old a joke. You don't remember that story about Ricky?
No, were you not?
Like he's there on your screen. He was like, "Oh, sorry, my bad."
No, you're thinking of Ricky, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I said. I said,
right, so I think you said Yam.
Not Ricky. Yeah, that's the point. Because he had that ridiculous one where you couldn't see something on his screen.
Yeah.
Still one of the most ridiculous stories I've heard.
I mean, like, I'm just gonna, I care less and less about people crucifying me for like.
Context, by the way, Blade himself said he thought we were 100% cheating. Which I actually personally think I will say.
It worse?
Let me tie this a second to something, because I will say, you notice I'm always very careful. Like, I think this was probably cheating. Key word is think. Like, I have no evidence whatsoever. I have like even circumstantial evidence is what I'm going off in the actual like fucking camera thing we're talking about. Like, what I'm essentially going off is I feel like they looked for way too long there. I even feel like, I get it, it's hard to tell because the angle of the cameras isn't always from the top of the camera, but I felt like they weren't even it didn't even look like they were looking on their monitor. It looked like they were looking to something else because they were looking so far up and away. And again, the amount of time they were looking while sometimes alive in the round. So to me, that implied you thought whatever you're looking at is more important than anything on your screen. That is extremely rare for Counter-Strike. Like, in my opinion, Counter-Strike, like, I saw people were trying to link to like simple clips when he looks for half a second, like, and then looks back. Or you look with your peripheral, like you might in League of Legends look at the map every now and then. You don't just look fully at it and look at nothing while moving around on the screen. Like that to me beggared belief. So I would say, though, just to very briefly say this, just like I don't think Fallen and the MIBR players ever should have publicly said that Leaf cheated or publicly intimated that he cheated in their scenario, I don't personally think if you Blade, you should ever say something like 100% sure they did it. Like, certainly say you have suspicions or you didn't, or you think there was something going on. The problem is if you say 100% that they cheated, mate, you're effectively doing what them did, which is all your fans are just going to go, they obviously cheated, and then it'll never matter whether they did or not. They get the same public punishment, don't they?
Yeah.
Just to get that out of the way.
Yeah, no, I think, look, if you ask me, I think there's something very wrong here. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Like it's hilarious because I've had the same thing. Like, you know, the moronic Brazilian CS fans tweeting at me saying you're a hypocrite for not calling out Blade for saying that, right? So here's the difference: bunch of very good young NA players beat your shit washed up Brazilian team, and right, your mind can't comprehend that's valid. Bunch of people, players who no fucker's ever heard of, batter the best teams in the world, and then after being accused, immediately can't get to double figures in the rounds. While there is video footage of them looking at something we don't know what. It is not a comparable situation. I think on the balance of probability, I think there is no balance of probability argument for the Leaf situation.
There was no evidence.
Yeah, Leaf is a cheater because look, he has killed this washed up piece of shit. Oh no, no, that is not that doesn't work for me. But when I see a player constantly looking at something over here while moving around, like he's trying to line his crosshair up and then playing out and doing it map after map, round after round, yeah, I'm going to say that don't look right to me. So, no, it's not comparable, Brazilian fans. So, just to let you know. That was the cheating thing.
By the way, there was one other thing to say as well, which is that the other area where this team absolutely fucked themselves, and anyone who's followed most of the stories I like to bring up, this is one of the classic trends, which is people get caught, and instead of just putting their heads together and thinking, right, yeah, our story together, what are we doing, what was going on there, what would be a plausible reason, they just go, fucking, let's all just say a bunch of random stuff that makes no sense. So, like, what was the explanation? You remember this, Richard? What was the explanation they gave as to what they were actually doing? Like, something mad, like, just looking or something like they didn't even have like a good reason.
No, there is no explanation. And
I have a good one though. This is what would be a funny one. I was thinking this is such a boomer reference, but you might appreciate it. They should have just said that they were getting instructions from the Great Gazoo. That's that little alien in the Flintstones.
Yeah, no, how can you be asked? No one knows what the fuck you're talking about, mate. Yeah, I do, obviously.
I don't give a fuck. Straight fire, the Great Gazoo. Go and Google that now, everyone.
Yeah, brilliant. You've nailed it, Duncan. The straight fire content. No, but like, for me, I like the cheating stuff. If they could have come up with a good explanation, it would have definitely helped. All that happened is that Sergey's guy tweeted out and said, "I've taken down the second monitor for the next game," and showed that he had a desk that's like, you know, the size of a fucking baby's high chair. I don't even know how he's playing on it. And it's like, that doesn't help, dickhead. That makes it more likely that you had something on your screen, on your one monitor. Like, you're not helping. Yeah, so there is no explanation as to what they were looking at that's been put forward. Yeah. I mean, look, the bigger problem with this whole event is the spectre of potential match fixing. I mean, like, for me, I can't think of a tournament of this stature in esports where, because I just recognize the signs now because I've been covering it for so long, and I've been working on the MDL ESEA stuff, which is just obviously never going to come out, and whatever, who cares? Fuck CS. But I've never seen a tournament of this stature involving teams of this stature have all the hallmarks of like some shitty Snow Sweet Snow or whatever the fuck they're called. Those cups that basically only exist to serve betting. There's no other reason to have them. And it looks like that. You've got the DDoSing that suggests an admin has leaked an IP to bettors. You have the potential that Akuma were given some sort of stream. Some, you know, like I said, it's just potential. We'll never know. But spoiler, when no matter what anyone in CIS says, we will never get to the bottom of this. You are just going to have to take it on the chin. Another reason why the RMR needs to be replayed from start to finish. But that's typical for match fixing. You give an underdog team no one's heard of a massive advantage, and obviously you can bet with reliable confidence that the underdog's going to win. How can they not? If you have a radar hack, it's a functional wall hack. So there's that. There's the fact that there were no form of competitive integrity protections whatsoever. Which, by the way, the implication there would be, why wouldn't you have those protections? Why wouldn't you want people recording POVs or voice comms, right?
Or any kind of anti-cheat.
Yeah, why wouldn't you want any of that? Well, if people are up to shenanigans for the purposes of making some money on the side, it would be awful if it came out. It would make your tournament look bad. So one way to make sure it doesn't come out is just have no way of catching anyone doing anything bad at all. That's the ultimate protection for competitive integrity, in a way, because if it's compromised, you'll never fucking know. So perfect, you've nailed it. And then just on top of that, the presence, like, the Men in Black of Chinese guys. Oh, sweet Jesus.
I just love that.
Just like the way he says it as though, like, in such a throwaway manner. Like, he doesn't explain how. Like, what were they, like, drinking a lot of tea, playing mahjong? What are you talking about? Just like, look at these Chinese. Oh, well, anyway, on with the game. Like, what?
Yeah.
That's some like big time conspiracy theory bullshit. It's just like, oh yeah, the Chinese guys were there. Everybody just like zeroes in on that one detail.
Because they're basically, in this scenario, they're the Men in Black, aren't they? Like, and then the Men in Black showed up and the helicopters. Oh shit! Like, the story immediately gets
Unfortunately, though, the reality is that esports, going back to Brood War, has been subverted by Chinese guys sitting on zero delay streams, and I don't want to belabor this point because we're not going to do anything about it.
No.
Games developers and big American corporations are beholden to China. That's why you have John fucking Cena coming out and talking in broken Mandarin about how sorry he is. Taiwan is a country. Incidentally, by the way, guys, check your Twitter, Duncan and Monty, because John Cena's following everyone in esports. I'll be dropping a straight fire tweet after this broadcast. Get the fuck away from me, UCCP shill. But anyway, yes, we're beholden to China because everyone loves money. And so, unfortunately, no one's ever going to come out and publicly say the biggest problem we have, the biggest threat to competitive integrity is match fixing and betting. And it all roads lead to China and Chinese crime syndicates. And the Chinese government isn't going to do anything about it. And Chinese development companies that you're partnered with, like Perfect World, aren't going to do anything about it. It is simply the cost of doing business. Not for me, never for me, but for everyone else in esports. So let's be real. Yeah, there were some Chinese guys sat on a stream, probably using that data to feed back to a betting syndicate. Most likely, we'll never find out who they were, what bets were placed, in what way the games were compromised. And in fact, when the inevitable investigation, because I do believe Valve will make a determination about this event in the next few days, when that comes out, there will be no mention of said Chinese guys. Just like the Men in Black, no one will remember them in a month.
So
it's a fucking joke.
As this actual topic, go on.
Just as a quick sidebar, there also have been other conversations about whether betting should be allowed in esports, and the answer is unequivocally yes, because it's going to happen anyway, and we can either do these partnerships with more above the board companies who are regulated, who are registered as betting corporations, or we can have a black market of gambling, guys. So there's the two. And the nice thing about doing the regulated side is that the esports industry actually gets money from it, whereas the other way, it's illegal, super shady, results in match fixing, and the industry itself gets none of that revenue. So anyone who is saying that we shouldn't have betting sponsors in esports is incredibly irresponsible, in my opinion. That is a complete sidebar.
And also, you don't know what esports industry you're voting for because you're voting for an incredibly tiny one at this point in time.
Yes.
If it has all that betting money, that's just a fact. Like, you're not going to have the shows you want. I know that this is like fans going, I should have all of these things and then ignore all the realities. It's like, that doesn't work. No, another point, this is why, in my opinion, it also all goes back in light of what ended up happening to what Richard said at the beginning about, like, look at who you're hiring to do this RMR Epic League through Epicenter. Like, remember, think about who Valve literally sat down and vetted in this regard. Anyone who knows anything about Epicenter when they came into the scene in, I think, 2016, was the people behind Epicenter, ES Force, owned Epicenter, a tournament circuit. Teams that played in Epicenter, so in 2017, the final of Epicenter was Virtus.pro, owned by ES Force, against SK Gaming, owned by ES Force, playing a final of a tournament owned by ES Force, which, as far as I know, they also owned a betting company. Was it Esports Bets? Was that it, Richard? Do you remember?
I can't remember off the top of my
which
head.
one it was, so I won't say then. They'd owned a betting company at the time, though.
But
right?
yeah,
Even though I'm not claiming they did anything with that, I would be very suspicious about someone who tries to own the tournament, teams that play in it, and the betting company all simultaneously. Because I'm not saying they did do something, but that would be wide open to abuse. Like, in obvious ways, you could tell the teams to throw, you could benefit certain teams, you could directly profit from the teams throwing or losing games. Right? In those scenarios, how Valve's looking at that and going, I'll just allow some of these conflicts of interest to exist while you run my tournament. Like, I don't know what's going on there, Valve. Like, you either don't know, in which case you're incompetent, or you do know and you're incompetent, or you wanted this. Like, I don't know what the positive is there. Especially because, as far as I know, in all the regions, CIS particularly is included in this, there are tons of people trying to do these RMRs. There's not like a shortage of people. So I just don't know why we even need to open the door to this, because, like, we couldn't have known it would play out this exact way, but this is what you get when you allow the sorts of people that have these conflicts of interest to operate in the space. They might abuse them like this, and some of it we'll never know, sadly.
And Valve do care as well. I was just going to say, because like with Monty's issue, like they wouldn't let him do it. We had a similar issue. Like we have a Counter-Strike team and we have a Valorant team. And the Valorant team is made up of ex-Counter-Strike pros. They're playing Valorant now for us. They're the best team in the region, undefeated. And they wanted to play the RMR. And Valve wouldn't let me. I emailed Valve and asked, like, can they play? And they said they can't because I have two rosters. Right. I have a CSGO roster and I have a Valorant roster. I mean, they just want to play for fun. I tried to spin it like it could be a cool publicity thing, like some Valorant guys coming back to CS to play a tournament, and wouldn't have a buy it.
Let me,
which is fine. But yeah, so they care about some of them.
Let me tell you another hilarious aspect to this fucking farce. And this, right, so it's because they want it to look impartial, right? The Russian Esports Federation is going to be doing the investigation and communicating everything publicly. Now, if you look at the chairman of the board of the Russian Esports. No, if you look at the chairman of the board of the Russian Esports Federation, who's been the chairman of the board since 2016, is Emin Antonyan, who also happens to be the CEO of ES Force Holding. So even the impartial investigative body is in.
Richard, on some level, I do feel sorry for Nicola Nyholm, because basically he just got fucked a million times over. Like, why have you got your hand in that cookie jar while everyone else in the entire rest of the world just did the same thing? We were all like, yeah, but you're not Danish, so whatever, just go ahead, mate. You're Chinese or Russian, so just go ahead. Like, it's actually sad, because remember, he was also trying to do this. He was trying to own all that and have his own, like, a federation. Like, you can't win, can you?
No, but I mean, everyone made the same play. It's just that some people, it's like a mark that you have to bear for the rest of your time in esports. But it's like I said, Hitcham Chahine tried to do the same thing. He had Copenhagen Wolves, LGB, NIP. He was trying to do the same shit. Everybody, and then somebody reports on it, right? Somebody, and then that gets called out, and then they go, I have divested myself of all I've given it to a mate, I've given it to someone, I've made some money, whatever it is. And then somebody else comes along and goes, why's no one tried to have a monopoly in esports?
By the way,
don't even do the cursory research.
My favorite one ever, because exactly as you say, and it's just the ESL approach. Like, my joke is that this is how ESL operate under Carmack's era, is if ESL got a priceless, like literally, like it's like 17th century table that was ornate and had gold carving, and one leg broke. Carmack would go, incredibly rare, 3-legged ornate table, one of a kind, like, should be even more money, really. Like that's how he would spin it. Like the negative would become a positive. So similarly, right, this is how utterly ridiculously clueless the esports industry is. Because I went back and looked, and when SK Gaming got sold to ES Force, right, Ralph Reichart himself, one of the head people of ESL, just comes out publicly and basically says that he sold his shares. So he brags in 2016 that he's only had like 16 years of direct conflict of interest where he's had an ownership stake in a team competing in his competitions. But he says that as all like, well, everything above board for the next 16 years. What? And everyone in the whole industry just goes like, yeah, seems all right. Well,
think about the petty abuses as well. Like when Carmack was editor of SK Gaming and he wins an award for like Journalist of the Year, then immediately joins ESL afterwards, and eventually ascends to becoming God of IM. It's like, come on, man, for fuck's sake. It's so pathetic. It's mad, isn't it? But it just is what it is. Like, it's just, you know, at the end of the day, like, I legitimately thought, I think 2015, 2016, I actually thought it was going to get better, and that conflict of interest could be something we could tackle and have an adult and sensible conversation about, and we could prevent people from essentially subverting the integrity of esports to just be all about profit and market share. But it's got worse. It hasn't got better.
People just don't. If you notice, the community sentiment is they don't really seem to fuck with this topic. Like conflict of interest to them, they think it's just nitpicking. They genuinely do.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, like I say, I won't belabor the point, but at the end of the day, the community think the biggest sin you can commit in esports is having an opinion and tweeting that opinion.
And blocking someone.
Yeah. Oh, and then maybe blocking somebody.
Mainly little Twitter functions, you'll notice.
Yeah. But and that is a bigger deal to the average esports pleb than here we have a company having a functional monopoly in a region and a massively compromised tournament, for which the results will almost certainly stand. Match fixing, whatever it is, name a big issue that's affecting esports. They care. They don't give a shit. They care way more about why can somebody have an opinion and express it free from any reprisals, because I can't do that at school. And that's why esports doesn't deserve
or whatever.
To
yeah, exactly. Yes.
Esports is garbage, and it's and it starts, like everyone says, oh, it starts at the top and it works. Nah, it starts at the bottom. Esports, it's garbage fans.
But I think the even bigger problem is that the companies then take what teenagers say on Twitter, and because they can't tell that they're just like teenagers, then they make business decisions based off of that, when that it's completely irrational and these people have no idea what they're talking about and aren't actually going to change their behaviors of watching or not watching an event as a result of the words that come out of their mouths.
Oh, the pandering that goes.
Yeah, the pandering is just wild to me. It's like they treat these voices as legitimate without knowing who's behind like the anime avatar. You know what I mean? It's like, you're 14 years old. I'm not going to listen to you.
Like, I know. If I have to see like another fucking prominent esports figure doing some like fucking Reddit apology, and there's people in there, like licky bum flap 42, and they're going like, yeah, I'm so deeply sorry. It's like when Tiger Woods apologized for having an affair. I don't care, mate. Go fuck around as much as you want, son. It don't bother me, right? Who are you actually apologizing to? Well, you're apologizing to the media, and you're apologizing to all the sticky beak curtain twitchers that have got fuck all to do with their lives. Used to just be bored housewives. Now it's fucking 17-year-old plebs who think they're smart because they might be going to university. Spoiler, it doesn't make your life brilliant. And it just puts you massively in debt, and I couldn't be happier for you, you cunts. But But yeah, that's just what the pandering that goes on. Like, what their opinions worth listening to? Is it their decisions are worth listening
What
to?
ridiculous.
Their selective outrage is worth dictating the whole direction of a business.
I just like
of an entire
in
industry.
Freude that they're just losing money for the degree or whatever.
Yeah.
It's something, I guess, Richard.
No, listen, I've reached the stage in life now where it's like back when they used to say, "Oh, Richard's just a bitter old man." It wasn't true. Oh, it's true now.
Oh,
Fuck you all. Like, I hope you go to university. I hope your degree shit. I hope you. I think it's brilliant that when I went to university, we did drugs and had sex, and it was wild. You're not doing any of that. You're just getting in debt. You're having no life experiences, and you actually come out more socially inadequate than when you went in. Brilliant. Good. You deserve that. You deserve that. Fuck you
guys,
all.
listen, when Richard was there, it was wild parties, indiscretion, like the time of your life. You guys go to uni, you're already 100k in debt before you step in the door. You go to step in the door, you see someone come along, you hold the door and go, "Sorry, ma'am," instantly misgendered, Title 9, you're out, you wreck, your whole family disowns you, you're dead by the end of the week,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
welcome to esports.
Yeah, it's dead by the end of the week. The esports story. But yeah, I'm just like, at the end of the day, if this is who the industry serves, then I don't want to serve the industry. It's nonsense. I mean, on a serious level, I mean, there's no sense of proportion or priority. We're not interested in fixing any of the problems. The problems have not only persisted, but progressively got worse. Players have got a better deal, and then they wield that power disproportionately. So you get dickheads like Chris J, who still hasn't figured out what an association actually does, yet talks endlessly about what an association can do and should do. Like players talking down to admins despite having all the power in that dynamic, in the red carpet rolled out.
I'll give you one of mine. One of my ultimate peeves, because it lines up with this topic actually about how people selectively choose what to be outraged at and what they're upset about. One of the things I hate is the fact that if you're a company, you can do like what would be considered 1,000 offenses for an individual, and you will never be held to any standard. Like, you could make a game, right? You could then, after making the game, rape people, steal from them, deny them basic things that the law would say they should have, just mistreat them in an arbitrary and capricious manner, right? If you're an individual, and as Richard says, you do a bad tweet, it's the end of the world. Like, you get involved in one scandal, it's always brought up. Because people want to play that game, they'll just forget everything. They'll just go, "Who cares? Men in Black myself. Oh, well, yeah, I'll just keep playing the game." Like, companies, somehow, they never carry the can in the way other people do. That's why, actually, essentially, to bring it back to the original topic, we start with the Flashpoint thing. The real mistake of Flashpoint was that me and Monty were the faces, and so we put a human face on it. If it had just been a company, people might have hated it, but they wouldn't actually, as far as I can tell with this track, they wouldn't respond in the same way, They just can't handle people, but somehow companies are out to fuck them up the arse all day.
Which is also funny
because
because
the end of the world.
One of the things that Flashpoint has done and continues to do, right, is just be transparent. Like, I come on this show. I Four Horsemen myself, by the way. Four Horsemen myself. Come here and explain in nuance, like, all the things that happened. Say, like, oh, yeah, it was messed up in this way. Like, these are the mistakes that were made. We've always answered questions that the fans have as transparently as we possibly can. We've been hands down the most transparent tournament operator on the planet, like in any esport. That's just true. Do you guys not want that? Do you just want to be fed bullshit all day?
The answer is, sadly, by the way, they don't. Because if people don't know, one of the things we did last year, it's one of the reasons why I was pissed with like the nature, like the contract I had. Every week, basically, I think on the top of my head, we probably did at least 20 of these episodes. We just did like a weekly show where we would address questions from the chat about these topics and be as transparent as we could. Spoiler, all those people who claim they want transparent, no one will turn up and watch the shit. There's like, it's like 200 people watching it or something like. No one actually, as usual, you all complain about stuff you don't actually want. Y'all are the people, basically, who spent 20 years going, "Right up, McDonald's serve the breakfast in the afternoon," and then you don't go and buy it. You don't go at 4 p.m. and buy an egg McMuffin, spoochy cunt McBurger, do you? You just fucking go, "Actually, I don't feel like that in the afternoon." It's like, you're the twat that ruins everything. Pretending you want stuff.
In the afternoon. I've already had my breakfast. Yeah,
exactly. I know. You're the ones who are asking for it. What the fuck?
I know. So GoMeZ, anything to add about the CIS RMR? What would you do? How would you handle it all, mate?
Oh, where to start?
Yeah, nice easy question for you.
Yeah, I don't understand why their RMR is all different organizers either. Like, why is that a thing?
Yeah.
Is it because they don't want to? Is the cost too high? Like,
I mean,
Monty, can you answer? Did you guys apply for multiple regions, or did you get given a
Uh,
region, or?
we did apply for multiple regions, but not at the same time.
So for this RMR, you just targeted EU?
Yes. And the reason is like it would be very hard for us with the space that we have to run multiple RMRs simultaneously at a good level of production. It would also probably be a very different sales process for partners because we, if we're doing this the CIS RMR, we're trying to attract more like Russian-based sponsors or whatever like that. So there's, if we do NA, like it's very different than selling for EU. So it'd be hard, I think, to sell across multiple regions at the same time for sponsorship. Whereas, for example, like if Valve was like, oh, what Flashpoint, why don't you do a CIS RMR in 2 months from now? Like we'd be like, yeah, we might be able to do that. You know what I mean? But in terms of studio space, staff, like casters, it's really hard, I think, to do that, especially since they would have to be happening at the same time or almost at the same time because they're similar time zones. So I think there are a lot of good reasons. Most we could have done it maybe, but it would have been worse production on both of them if it was going to happen simultaneously. You know what I mean?
And I mean, full transparency, like we played in the Oceania, which was also Epicenter, and our tournament was seeded off your Faceit ELO, which I mean, half people don't even play Faceit, So teams got seeded quite randomly. So it wasn't perfect either, but I kind of understood that to an extent because, like, what do they care about our region? Like, they can't, you can't sell as sponsors for that, So I kind of got it why ours was a little bit scuffed, but I guess the reason they got it originally was because of the Russian language barriers, and they probably just thought it would make more sense to give it to a tournament organizer that has popular figures and what do you call it, like Twitter followers for that demographic. Like it would have been easy for them to advertise it more, I guess. I don't know. Like, you just need to get people that know how to do it, I think is the thing. And I don't know enough about Epicenter specifically or that RMR to really judge, but it didn't look great. I think Starladder used to do a good job in that region. I don't know what happened to them.
WePlay is, I think, really strong in terms of their production as well. I mean, they were our partner for the Russian broadcast of the EU RMR.
I was going to say, that's the crazy thing, right? Like, Epicenter being selected in the first place is wild to me, given how many good TOs are in that region.
I'm not sure if the other ones applied or not. Maybe they didn't, because I would have thought Starladder. I mean, I've had really good experiences with Starladder. Don't know.
Yeah,
but I mean, this should be utterly disqualifying for Epicenter. They should never be allowed to work another Valve event again, in my opinion. I'm not saying take the license off them so they can't host CS events, but the integrity violations are too grave as far as I can tell. You've only got 3 RMRs. We've got to squeeze them all in before the major in November. And what they've essentially done is created one that is so compromised it may as well be invalid. And it just so happens to be in the strongest region and could have like really grave ramifications. Imagine if Na'Vi don't get there. That'd be outrageous. That would be absolutely outrageous. So yeah, I'm sure Valve will be taking this into consideration for future events. And I think Epicenter are out.
I mean,
can you see a
I think
I was just gonna say, you go.
No, I was just gonna say, I think it has to be replayed. I think it's the only thing you can do at this point. Like it's been so compromised. There's just too many questions. You know what I mean? There's just too many questions. Like even if nothing happened, just like the perception of it alone is very bad. And unfortunately, I would like to believe that you have this up and coming team that had this Cinderella run. Unfortunately, in my esports experience, that's much less likely than all of the other potential like cheating or match fixing scenarios that we've had. Like in terms of like incidents in esports, it's very rare for a team to come and like beat some of the best teams in the world. Not only just one of those teams, but multiple of those teams at one event. And then also to have this like dark cloud hanging over it. It's really bad. unfortunately.
What were you gonna say, GoMeZ, mate?
I was gonna say, do you reckon there's a chance Valve run RMRs on their own servers and own equipment to cut down on some of these issues? I mean, most of these functionality exists, like with the map vetoes and all that exists in the client. Like,
yeah, I don't know. I think probably not. I think one of the reasons why we've got the system we've got is that they can hand it out to regional operators and basically have them be the person that does all the troubleshooting and I don't think Valve are interested in getting their hands dirty, so to speak. But what I will say is I do think in terms of the integrity issues, they are going to be more hands-on, I think, now. I think because it's an RMR. I mean, like, I talked about this when they banned all the cheating scumfuck coaches, right? Like, it was finally Valve making a determination on something that happened external to a Valve event. And they handed out bans for Valve events. That was unprecedented. Then they went and revised the VAC ban rule. That was unprecedented. And so I think, if I was a betting man, I would I think Valve are all over this. I've seen a lot of people in the community going, Valve aren't even doing anything. It's like, what? How the fuck do you know, dickhead? Like, they haven't said anything. But if they're doing an investigation, you wouldn't, Plebby McPlebbington on Reddit's not going to fucking know about it.
Let me put it this way. We in the industry often don't even know what Valve is doing. So there's no way that you guys know what Valve is doing. And it's not that they're not doing anything. It's just that Valve does things on their own time, and they don't have a giant parade down the street to let everybody know what's going on. They're going to investigate it internally, and they're going to come out with a decision that they feel is correct, right? And
they move in mysterious ways, and the problem with doing that is it makes people question whether you actually exist in the first place.
It's true.
It is true.
Dan Valve taking care of on that one. So
yeah, so I think they will make a comment. I think that's around the corner. I just don't know what the options would be. Because I agree with you, Monty. I think, mate, like you do have to replay the whole tournament to fix the integrity matter, but you can't. It's logistically impossible. So I don't know what the next
the
stage
compromise
down.
I would make would be something like maybe, because half the problem here is you can't just make it the next RMR because, for example, some teams might not qualify for it. Like maybe the Akuma team doesn't qualify because, they would have actually missed the points if they end. So whatever the scenario. So maybe you have to do something like, I know this sounds fucked up, but like do another qualifier, have a mega RMR that has twice as many teams or some shit. I don't know how you do this to accommodate and double the points or something. Like it's not perfect as a compromise, but it's better than having these shit results.
Yeah, there's two solutions that spring to my mind. That are probably not really solutions, that might be stupid, but you either declare it invalid and then you take all of the points accrued and you distribute them evenly from every team that attended, or as you say, you declare it invalid and you add the points that you would have got from this RMR onto the next one.
Yes.
But that isn't fair because then it's doubly as important.
Certainly. Yeah, that's as I said, there's no perfect solution in this scenario.
Yeah.
You can't replay,
they could just delete it and just pretend like it never happened. And then the first RMR is the next one. Just no points.
Yeah, I mean that's possible. What I would say about that is I would feel incredibly aggrieved if I was, like
a Spirit, I guess.
Yeah, Spirit, like Spirit, Gambit, both did well at that event, and it's like, obviously Gambit's the #1 team in the world. You don't want to be fucking with that. So yeah, it's a hard one. I mean, like maybe even distribution of all the points, but I don't know. And I this is what always, like, these are the instances where I feel sorry for Valve. Not that the community will ever sort of understand that Valve don't, like. I'm sick and tired of people like summoning Valve like the fucking Horsemen every time there's a problem like this. It would be better if this could be resolved without them, frankly. It would be better if we could run a tournament from start to finish without Valve having to come in and make a declaration. It makes us look incompetent. It makes us look like children. And on a long enough time scale, Valve will get incredibly bored of having to do it, and they'll stop doing it. And then the next thing that follows is if they stop doing it, they'll simply stop having the tournaments and the majors and everything in the first place.
Also, for the other people within the esports ecosystem, maybe wait a little bit before you start flying off the handle on social media Because as we found out from the entire Flashpoint issue, it was, it was the server's fault. It was the tournament operator's fault. It was Flashpoint's fault. But if you just wait instead of making crazy tweets as an org and all of these complex statements, the due diligence will be done. And then maybe the tournament organizer will be like, oh, it was our fault, and then publicly apologize and do the right thing. Like, you have to have some level of confidence. You can't just fly off the handle with no evidence or no, the precedent. It's a terrible precedent and creates all this drama that is much more easily avoidable if you just say, let's give this 24 hours to see if we can resolve this issue behind closed doors and come out with a unified statement so we don't all look like fucking morons.
Yep.
And then we don't have to go out and then we don't have to persist in this drama of like, well, here's our updated statement and the timeline of events and blah, 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 blah. As information just kind of trickles out piecemeal so nobody gets a complete picture and then people get mad and then everybody loses. Because nobody won in that situation, right? Like, NIP looked bad. Anonymo was probably the biggest winner, but even they kind of looked bad, right? Flashpoint looked bad. What was the purpose of doing that? Because we were going to arrive at the same place no matter what.
I mean, obviously the answer. It's like the short-sightedness of team owners and who they think they serve and who they think they work with. If there's no like direct with them, they'll immediately go and try and leverage the fan base, won't they? So,
I think he's has to just go on, probably some answer the door or something for a second.
Yeah.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, it's okay.
Don't worry about it.
We need to get into the questions anyway. I feel like I feel like we've kind of exhausted.
When he comes
this topic.
back, we'll tell him he can just leave, and then we'll set up the cameras or whatever.
Nice.
Do the Q&A.
Yeah.
I assume he's only going to be a minute or two.
So, how do we do questions again?
We will do.
They're already in like for people to know, you have to have like the GROG coins, and you have to have 25 of them. So you buy the coins and you go to the GROG lounge, isn't it, on Discord, Monty?
Yep.
And then it tells you in the pinned comment like how to buy it or whatever, right?
Yep. That's it. You nailed it.
There you go. See.
So we'll start with some of the questions now while we're waiting. All right. So this is funny. As gamers, how have you gone about overcoming skill level plateaus in the various games you play / have played in a competitive and serious manner? Well, for me, guys, I didn't do that. That's why I'm not a professional player. I made a conscious decision that I am not going to grind games, and instead I'm going to watch film of the games to be an analytic commentator and a color caster in certain games, right? So for me, it was choosing how I was going to spend my time. I chose to spend my time watching the game instead of playing the game very deliberately. Had I continued, so no, I didn't ever overcome that problem, as it were.
Oh, by the way, GoMeZ, we're doing the questions now, mate. So you can go. Like, thanks for coming on the show, mate.
Yeah, thank you. Unless you have any final words, it's been great having you on.
Thanks for having me. I just had a random guy at my door. He got his apartment mixed up at 4 a.m. So
thank you for staying up so late. We appreciate you.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
All right, Matt.
It's all good. I'll leave you guys to it and
peace.
Enjoy the questions.
Yeah, look after yourself, brother. You take care. Catch you later.
See ya.
I expected he was going to at least work in some joke, like he was talking Chinese or something. I think he was asking me what I was doing on the call.
Chinese guys.
You know what I mean? Like,
no.
What would you say? Because I know Richard plays Dota quite a bit. So, like, do you have any like approach to getting past skill plateaus?
I mean, listen, and it's not like obviously I'm not like super high skill at Dota or whatever. I played about legend level. That's like shit tier 3K, whatever. But yeah, like this is true for any game, and it still blows my mind to this day how many people don't do this. Best thing you'll ever do is go back and watch your own play.
It's incredible
right?
People don't do this.
Yeah, I know, right? People don't fucking do it, mate. In CS, they don't do it. And let me explain, right? There's two parts to this answer. But the first thing is, like, you have to watch your own play so you can contextually understand what you're doing in a given moment, how it relates to a broader, the meta game, essentially, in the sense of what's happening in that game, all the shit that's going on around you. But also just little things like people become utterly convinced, and this is why, CSGO is not a serious community. The amount of people that cry cheats just because they've had their head banged off. And if you go and watch the game, you will see no one's cheating, mate. He's watch it from his perspective. Online games perspectives don't always align. What you think is happening isn't necessarily true. So all that's important. But yeah, watching your own play. And then the other thing, watching your own play will only take you so far, right? Because if you're shit, if you're a scrub, you can see something being suboptimal, but you don't know how to make it optimal because you're shit. So you have to find somebody else who isn't shit. And the best thing I ever did in Dota was I got a guy, a friend of mine, who's like a very, like divine level player. And basically he taught me how to play. And I play with those guys regular. And one of the things we do after our games is we literally fire up Discord. We stream the last game. You did this here, Richard, and it was fucking dumb. And this is fucking why. And you don't do it in your next game. And then your theory with something like Dota and League to a lesser extent, you're always building stuff up, in your mind, and it's theory that you can apply.
Oh.
Then they patch the game and it no longer applies. So, but yeah, that's what you have to do. And like for CS players and FPS players, the amount of people that have never watched their own playback is incredible. It's staggering. I would say probably about like 80-90% of players that claim they want to learn and go pro or whatever don't do it. It's mad.
It's the fastest way to get better, for sure.
I actually do have a video I made on my YouTube channel. It's for CS, actually, specifically. It was called something like How to Improve, and I basically go over, I explain how to focus on the fundamentals, how to, gradually, incrementally change what you do in the game. So that's the serious answer. The not so serious, but absolutely real answer is I actually have a superpower none of you people have, which is I don't give a fuck what my rating in any game on this earth is. So when I play... If in CSGO, if you ever see me play on Vince's stream, the whole reason I do have some utterly bonkers clips, like highlight clips, is because I just play off instinct. I don't care. So I go for no scopes all the time, like I am simple. Now you don't see the 25 times I missed them all and just lose the round, and people are like, I wish you'd maybe aim with that gun, because the one time I do it, that clip comes out and I look sick, don't I? I look like, fucking hell, I didn't know he was that good. I'm not. That's actually the only thing I ever did. And similarly, I've explained this in the past. People think I'm just saying it to be funny. I don't play League of Legends. I play a mini game in League of Legends called Pike Support, where I pick Pike every single time, no matter what the comp on my team is, no matter what the comp on the other team is, no matter whether it's nerfed, I don't care. I play a Pike, and what I do is, I've said this again, I don't give a fuck. If the second I operate on a 3-strike Spaceball style trust scenario with my AD carry, the third time he doesn't go in and follow up when I'm going into 24/7 aggressively to attack them because I'm Pike, I just go enjoy the laning phase, fucker, and then he sits under his tower 1v2 and I roam across the rest of the map, which essentially means, because I'm not even getting levels in lane, I must get 10 kills in a row, otherwise I have thrown the whole game. And you know what? You're probably thinking, but that couldn't work every time, Thorin. What about the games you lose? Yeah, that's a problem with my teammates, because they're getting fucking paired with me in whatever division I'm in, and it ain't a good one, by the way. So as you might expect, I don't climb, because guess what? Even if I have 3 really good sick Pike games, I'll probably have 7 shit ones after that where it wasn't even appropriate to play, and just get my head banged off. And at the end, I just go, whatever, just games in it.
The fun, you are actually doing something that I would also argue is a good fundamental, though. Not being a cunt, which is definitely another superpower you possess. But no, honestly, one of the reasons people fucking fuck themselves up in MOBAs is they don't actually ever master a hero. They pick things they think are counters at low MMR. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
Being able to play your hero well, for example, think of the hero you think you're the best at. Right, what's the mana cost for your Q? Bet you don't know, and you don't, right? And then, okay, so what's a QW combo look like? What's the cooldown on this spell? I guarantee, again, people who think they're serious at MOBAs can't answer those questions. It's like I've got a very small hero pool of non-technically demanding heroes in Dota, but I play them all well. I know my cooldowns. I know every matchup I'm going to come into in the lanes and who I can fight and who I can't. And you need to concentrate and focus on that. If you think, oh, right, well, I want to play carry this game and I'll pick Troll, isn't he strong this patch, and you've got 10 games, you deserve to lose. People don't even play against bots in their spare time, claim they're serious about climbing MMR.
Yeah,
Don't
maybe don't play in a MOBA in ranked, the hero / champion that you've literally never played before. Maybe spend some time on normals or like in a practice mode. I don't know.
So you don't need to be a one trick by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a reason why so many of the people that accrue the most MMR in League, especially, there's a reason why so many of them are, because it is better to play one hero well and understand every matchup in the game and understand every itemization path depending on game state than it is to play 10 heroes mediocre. You know?
Also, team composition only really matters at higher level because there's so many
Yeah.
mistakes being made in solo queue games that it's kind of irrelevant most of the time.
Yeah, if you're not in a position where the other people in your game are talking to you on a voice chat about and explaining what they're going to pick and why, and could you pick this to enable them or whatever, if that's not happening, your pick literally doesn't matter.
Yes.
It couldn't matter less.
All right, here's another question. What incident in front of you has mentally broken an analytical broadcast talent for an esport the most behind the scenes when it comes to the idea that viewers don't actually care about real complicated tactics? For example, I think Thorin in some stories referenced like Yanko or Sponge in CSGO getting really upset because they did some in-depth analysis and no one cared. Similarly, no one watches Freak's patch notes for League of Legends. That's not even Freak's best content. Like his patch notes are good, but like also his like XP versus gold value content is super good. I mean, it's tilting, right? Because you love the game and as an analyst, spend thousands and thousands of hours watching it, and you're trying to impart that knowledge to the viewer. And it doesn't, I still get tilted because it doesn't matter that I did hundreds, if not thousands of games of League of Legends over the years, and no one remembers my actual analysis. They just remember me blowing a train whistle. Right.
Yeah.
It ties into what we were asking about the question about getting better, because really most people who ask how do I get better just want to know where is the secret tree that if you go there and dig up what's beneath it, there's a little box and there's a potion which makes you 10 times better. They don't want to hear unsexy stuff like focus on the fundamentals, don't make outrageous plays that you don't understand, do like Richard says, master 3 heroes and just learn the matchups and learn basic gold, like efficiency for an item or what the spell costs so you can calculate if you can even do your combo to get the kill. Like they don't want to hear that, because what they want to hear is like something that doesn't exist, which is a magic hack to be good. So similarly, I've said this to so many of my fans now, because I've been able to fully A/B test all of this in content, because I've tried every type of content, and I can tell you right now, almost nobody, functionally nobody, in terms of how many fans there are in the world, cares about analytical and tactical content. It's the least interesting content to the entire fan base. The problem is this: the vocal minority who make up Twitter and Reddit essentially only go on there to pose as people who care very much and are the most expert, like level guys in the world. And so because their whole shtick is they pretend they really care deeply about tactics and in-depth analysis, it's the only metric they value. They literally grade everyone off, by the way. As a result, it leads people to sadly think like content creators, that's what people want. Whereas what you'll actually find is, if someone makes a video that is, on the one hand, very highly viewed, but is analytical content, I'll tell you right now what it's going to be. It's going to be LS, and they're tuning in because of his personality. It's going to be maybe Freak, and he has Riot behind him pushing it. Like, it ain't just because of the analytical content. It's got to be also who the person is, what their name value is. Do the fan find them entertaining? Like, one of the reasons why on my talk shows, no matter how much people may dislike me, one of the reasons I am vital to my talk shows is because I can get someone like LS, and instead of just letting him go on about the analytical side that would bore you, find a way to craft the conversation so he still gets the same points across, but it might entertain you as well. Like, maybe there's some drama, maybe there's some banter, maybe we argue a little bit. That's what people really come for.
And also,
I think this is the internet in general, by the way. People only really care about entertainment. That's what it's for. Everything else is like, it's like the reason you say you like a band. You like the band because it plays to your ear. You don't really like them because they're so technical and they're from this school of music. You don't. That's what you tell yourself after the fact to seem cool, isn't it?
I mean, even when I do VOD analysis or something like that on stream or videos, like I try and make it more entertaining by having exaggerated reactions or going on rants or like bringing up. You have to break it up, otherwise it's just boring. To you,
dude,
it's not boring to me.
The ones who don't like me on league shows goes, he's just shouting all the time. Like, do you imagine if I got like Kelsey Moores and fucking Emily Rand and like Veteran, and we all sat in a chat and we're like, no, we're all like C-SPAN, like, What do you think about the invasion of the Viet Cong in 1970 by the watch nobody? It's only cause like. By the way, if you haven't figured out that that's not actually a downside, that I can rant about a children's video game and some people I don't really give a fuck about in America. That's a skill, mate. I'm actually bringing something to the table there. You enjoy it clearly. You
Yeah,
even love to hate it. You even love to hate it, don't you? Come on.
You know, it's kind of interesting as well. It's like, so I can use an example we all know, like Sponge, right? Like I've known Chad a long, long time, consider him a very good friend. Knew him from the Source days back in CGS when he was like the young breakout teen sensation from Australia. We kept in touch. I followed his journey. I was in a bar with him drinking when he was mad disappointed last tournament he crashed out of, and he was contemplating retirement and staring into the abyss, wondering what he was going to do next. And said, listen, mate, you'll kill it. Caster, analyst, you've got a big personality. But when he first came into the scene, he's naturally funny. He's gifted like that. But he wanted to really make the most kind of erudite, intelligent, technical points. Because it was almost like initially when he first came in the scene, it was like almost he wanted to sort of justify, I wasn't as bad as what you thought I was.
Yes.
A lot of
He wanted to show,
people,
like, at least in theory, he got it. He was
yeah,
smart.
a lot of
exactly.
people criticized him so vehemently
Yes.
from his playing days that it actually colored his transition into analysis a little bit. The best version of Chad is the version we got now. He doesn't give a fuck, and sometimes he have to make the most technical point. I know he knows, right? But when he's on a podcast and he's ranting and raving, that's best Chad. When there's a deviation in casting, because that's what he does now, and he's like talking about some mad anecdote or making a joke, that's best Chad. He knows the game, he knows the theory, but if he'd just been another ex-pro that only talked about that, he would have eventually faded. He wouldn't be the box office that he is now. And I think what disheartens analysts the most is when they learn that without the showmanship, all your points can be intelligent, but eventually people get bored. You've got to have some sizzle on the steak.
The weak ones will get, will get dissuaded by that. Perhaps I think like the best ones realize actually the best way to present my points is in a more entertaining fashion or more compelling fashion, which makes people remember your analytic points better. So it's actually in the end a much more useful tool, right?
Yeah.
Right, it's harder.
And it's like, listen, in Dota 2, I see people in the chat like bringing up Purge, and it's like he's like a very specific and unique example, I think, because he straddles having high technical knowledge despite having never been like a really serious pro player, but also he's very beginner friendly, but he's also a bit dry. And this is why the best content I think you get from him is when it's either him by himself in a short burst on a broadcast, like the Weatherman segments that we used to do for Yanko and stuff. That he's great at those, nails those. They're tailor-made for him because he doesn't outstay his welcome. Or you have to put him with someone like Sir Action Slacks.
Or Day 9. I mean, you really saw like his partnership with Day 9 and like him teaching Day 9 Dota was hugely successful. For a good reason, because Day 9 provides the entertainment value and the foil of the beginner to Purge's expertise.
Yeah, and like I think actually the one area Dota's massively improved in terms of like desk talent lately is their analysts have all got better. Like BSJ, I think, has finally given up on the notion he's gonna win a TI for NA or whatever it was. I like him. I think he's really good. I think Jenkins is great. For me, he's the like really underrated dude in Dota broadcasts. Got a lot of time for that guy. He's got a very dry humor about him, knows what he's talking about, great voice, great syncopation of speech, like very fucking accessible. So yeah, I think, but like if you remember, if you go back 2 years and you watch the Dota desk, man alive,
dry as fuck.
Mate,
it was
like
horrible.
Clockwork in orange, mate. Like my eyes
really
were
bad.
held open. So, now they've realized it's the lesson we all arrive at, that it is an entertainment product first. And if you are not entertaining and only educational, you will not survive in this business.
All right. So this is a good one. Who deserves the Esports Crybaby Award so far in 2021? excluding the obvious picks of Nip, Anonymo, Device, since they would be contenders. I don't even think they're the biggest contenders. I think this was a one-off blip about one game. For me, it's the League of Legends owners crying about the import rule at LCS. That has got to be so far the biggest crybaby bullshit, because that's just covering up for their years and years of neglect of developing a truly good amateur scene in North America. So, I mean, the fact that they want the system to change because they were negligent in their own duties of developing amateur talent is staggering.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I'll let you jump on this one, Duncan.
I don't think I've got one for that one. Who I can try to think who's complete. To be fair, by the way, Na'Vi fans could be in the mix. Like, what they cried about in CS wasn't even justified. Like, we weren't even that. What's mad is, that's how you know people aren't in good faith. Like, you know, they always pretend like, I watch your show and I know what your opinions. You don't, because, like, the idea that was even vaguely the most edgy shit we've even said about Na'Vi, for fuck's sake. Like, if you want to get upset, go back a few years to, like, 2019 when we talk about Zeus and Edward, mate. You'll fucking, your head will blow up. Like, if you think the shit that we didn't say that you read on websites was bad, see the shit we actually did say. I used to say the shit all the time about it. I'd say it to his face right now after I'd slap the bit fucking in a video game. If there was a slap feature, like maybe GoldenEye, if I was playing GoldenEye with the chop mode, whatever
mate,
that was.
Time splitters, mate. Time splitters.
There we go. Time splitters.
That's in there.
But yeah, basically, he wasn't a fan of that guy. So leave it.
Yeah, no, he was an arsehole, wasn't he?
There for sure.
He was an arsehole. But yeah, listen.
I don't know if you saw this, Richard, because you might have gotten this, but there was one detail about the RMR with Flashpoint and the CIS one that actually I forgot to mention, but I would be remiss for the By the Numbers crowd if I didn't mention this, because you'll have been tagged in a few of these. Right, just when you think to yourself, right, that's about all the scandal and outrage you can have, there was a few Brazilian fans who were tagging me and Richard going, if this had been Brazilian players, of course, who'd said that someone cheated, like they're saying about Akuma, you'd have said all. It's like, so again, I hope we're all aware that in every scenario, even ones that don't relate to them, Brazilians are the ultimate victims and are always the ones that are being persecuted. So in this scenario, the fact that we didn't say anything is actually, again, why. Bloody hell, Richard, we've done it again.
We've done it again. We have done it again. It's hard for me because I've got obviously recency bias affecting me. The NIP saga that we've obviously talked about is so staggeringly pathetic in retrospect, and I know
yours has to be the Rocket League community short for 2021, Richard. Surely they literally had thousands of tweets saying he's blocked me, he's blocked me, I blocked me, he's blocked me, he's blocked me.
Yeah, but the thing, but it's like I said earlier, they're just, they're fucking all like 13, 15 year olds.
Just for comedy alone, you should watch this video he did about the Rocket League one. Because in it, he has that part where, that famous song, the one that Benny Hill did, Spanish Flea, sorry. You know the one, he just plays that music as he scrolls all the ones where they're saying he's blocked. And it lasts the whole length of the song. Like, there's just thousands of, like within like a 4-year period, they'd tweeted like thousands of times, like Richard Lewis all of the It's outrageous how mentally ill this one is. Like, you wouldn't believe it. Because genuinely, you would think he was using hyperbole if he said it was that many. But when you see it, you're like, what even is it?
It was like when the Overwatch guys got me trending. That was pretty funny.
So, shout out to the incredibly crybaby Overwatch League community too, because the latest one for them was when they announced that Overwatch 2 is going to be 5 versus 5. They mounted this crybaby campaign being like, but what about the off-tank players' jobs in Overwatch League? And then as if that's like a legitimate concern to a competitive discipline. And so they were just out there trying to save these people's jobs from a switch in the number of players in a game, which is...
That's why I'm actually glad politics hasn't fully connected with esports. I don't want to live in a world where someone like you, a world head leader of states, coming out like, and I'm going to secure the jobs of the off-tank players from Denmark, some fucking angle, and we're going to bring them back soon. I'm going to have the next council with Blizzard. Like, I don't want to live in that world. That's why we're heading to, guys.
Yeah, it's really hard. Like I said, I mean, at the end, it's just all crybaby bullshit, isn't it? It's just a sea of fucking nonsense of just petulant arseholes who all want to get their way all of the time.
I'm really split because, I don't want the government tracking us. But in Korea, sometimes I'm really jealous about how you have to tie your social security number to all of your online accounts so that you can't just be an anonymous 12-year-old on the internet. You know what I mean?
Thing is, the anonymous 12-year-olds don't bother me so much. The problem is, like, for example, there are serious mentally ill stalkers that like fucking have plagued me for years. And there's even ones, as I said, that like, I don't talk about because it's like one step away from law enforcement. Yeah.
I've had a couple like that.
But yeah, like on the crybaby front, that's just all we do as humans. It's like, can we just hurry up and how long before we're extinct? Can we fucking hurry it up, please? I'm fucking sick of it. It's so pathetic. Like the banality of like Western existence, and like this is what we do with our fucking time. Like, hey, I'm really interested in this industry. I'm gonna spend all day on social media randomly pigeonholing people as being either entirely good or entirely bad, then forming a complete identity around that and form parasocial relationships with people I've never met, and then never shut the fuck up about it and treat it like it's a life or death issue. What's that? There's people dying over there in that country. Yeah, not asked about that.
This is the problem with like the death of religion, is that people just replaced religion, or at least the death of polytheism, because an unknowable God in monotheism that you can't even contain in your mind doesn't actually solve any of these human psychological issues that they have. So what they do is they just replaced like Zeus and Hera with like esports players.
3 clicks, fill it.
Dude, that's the worst thing of all, though. Like, listen, I have plenty of opinions and some certain dislikes towards certain deities in the world, but most of them at least have, like, some codified, like, moral laws and teachings that people could benefit from. People have taken those gods and just replaced them with, like, reckless, and now the main, like, fucking, like, the number one, like, cause in the world is just
K-pop
slightly
bands.
passive as an AD carry, like... This can't be the fucking. There's no way to live,
And imagine though, imagine like having a window into the mind of like one of those K-pop fans that's like literally out there saying they are willing to kill, to fucking pay like anyone that insults BTS or whatever. Like,
but this is the problem. Like people,
how are you fucking real, man?
I mean, look at the celebrity, magazines or whatever, like the celebrity drama mags. Usually back in indigenous human societies, people would be like, oh yeah, man, Hera's probably pretty mad at Zeus for turning into a goose and knocking that chick up. You know what I mean? That's what they would talk about. We've just replaced it with real human beings now, which is so fucked up. Like these people don't deserve that.
Oh, wait, I've just realised, because I'm trying to go through all the things this year. That is sad, by the way, how many things have happened this year already, Rich. We're only halfway through. And because I've just realised I completely forgot when all of Call of Duty, when I was trending on Twitter, because all of Call of Duty was like, it's Leo! He's having a breakdown! And meanwhile, I'm just like, why did the chicken cross the road? And then they're like, what is this? He's constructing fan fictions about chickens! Like... Even pro players were doing this, guys. Like I did. This is the maddest one ever, Monty. I thought I actually just left reality and I'm in some Twilight Zone episode. It's when I did that fucking Irishman, Englishman, Scotsman themed joke about 3 of the COD players, right? And I even purposely, I don't even follow the game, and I put in the legwork, like, thematically making them fit the right personality and what they would say, and it was all relevant. And at the end, right, a pro player, I'm trying to think who it was. It was like, oh, fuck, I'm going to say it was... I can't remember. It's one of the ones who played for Optic who had like ginger hair, if you remember it. Oh, I'm talking about. Fuck, who am I referring to there? Some super famous player. Scump, there you go. That's right. Yes, like the one that back in the day. I don't know if I could say Richard, but someone said, "Look, like, I mean, the name alone is like you do sound like you're redneck, like."
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Scump, and like that's what I thought when I saw him first. But anyway.
Yeah. No. I'm pretty. Didn't you say he looks like he'd been brewing moonshine? Or something?
Yeah, there you go. This is back in the day when we had those CS events that were at the same event as like a COD event, like fucking Gfinity or whatever. Basically,
I worked the COD event and literally turned up in a fucking obey cap. Like, yeah, when we were doing the MLG siren on, they thought I was mental. They liked it though.
No, but that guy was actually saying to the other players, and then he constructed this weird fanfic about you living on a desert island. It's like, it's a fucking joke. It's one of those famous joke formats in Anglosphere history. You are an English speaker, surely, Scott. Well, I mean, history. Maybe not enough, to be fair, but, you know, give me a break, mate. That's why I couldn't handle Monty. It'd be totally fine if they said, I don't find you funny. People have been telling me that my whole motherfucking life. I'm used to that. It's when they tried to gaslight me, I wasn't even making jokes. Like, what? You know, they just made out like, you're like, 38-year-old man going mad. Well, I was 37 at the time, but, you know, 37-year-old man on the internet, everyone. And the worst one of all, right, for me was this. I think Jordan Kaplan who said this, when he was saying that, I looked it up. He's like 26. By his own logic, how is he not the boomer as well? Like, 28-year-old man, like, give me a break, mate. Why is it any time? By the way, you do realise, young Zoomers, this is where you're all chumps. When you say 28-year-old man, 30-year-old, you're just the equivalent of the fucking boomer going, I can't believe it's insert current year, and then something totally arbitrary, has no connection to the year, is happening. You're just that. That's the Zoomer version of it.
Days. That's what they're doing, the inverse of kids these days.
Exactly.
That's all it is.
All right, next one. This is a good one. I'm sure we all have opinions about this. Assuming you guys watched Valorant's first LAN, what are your thoughts about the event? And then the 10s C9 to Sentinels reportedly 7-figure transfer. I mean, that's kind of just whatever. Like, it's a 7-figure transfer in esports. That's pretty common, right? Cool. Yep. He's on Sentinels now. I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on that. Do you guys have any opinions on the Valorant event and what you saw? You may have noticed it on Shroud's stream.
Yes. So lots of opinions actually of just sort of disparate parts, because I was working an event at the time, so I was trying to like catch up.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff. It was hard for me to like watch it too.
I saw a lot made. Let's start with the big one. Saw a lot made of the million viewership on Twitch. A lot of people talking about that. And
what context? Like comparable to a CSGO major or something?
Well, just saying, you know, it's its first major event and it's broken million viewers. But that obviously doesn't tell the full story, because as Monty's already said, like 300,000 of them were on Shroud's core stream.
2/3 of them were on co streams.
Yeah. You get into this, like, you know, you get into this world where, listen, if Overwatch League could go back in time and launch with popular people doing the co-streams, I'm pretty sure they fucking would.
They would have Ninja and all those guys.
So as a comparison point so the first day of Overwatch League, there were something like almost 400,000 viewers on the main Overwatch League stream for English on one stream. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a good strategy right now for Riot, but you know, whether these people stick around, whether that viewership. So there were lots of things. Just like, I will say this from my own experience, just like Overwatch League, when it launched and it was the first LAN, there were a lot of people who were kind of just rubbernecking the stream, being like, what, we're going to check this out. What's going on here? It's not an indication of long-term fan number stability. Valorant had a lot going for it this time around. It was Counter-Strike and other tactical shooters are not on LAN right now, so we got to see LAN. It was the first time we've seen any interregional competition in Valorant, which is very exciting, and people were curious like how all the different regions ranked up against each other. It was the first Valorant LAN event ever. So all of these things, and then there were big co-streamers that they brought on. So all these things worked in its favor. So that's not an issue. It's just saying that I'm not sure this is like the level of viewership or we're going to expect it to go up. If anything, I expect it to decline. Not to say that it can't be a viable or stable esport, but there are a lot of factors in play here that are just not going to be there the next time the events take place, especially over a year when you're seeing a lot more LANs. LANs return to kind of the normal status quo, potentially interregional competition returns to the status quo, right? So, and none of the Valorant events that went into this had anywhere near comparable viewership to this. So
no,
good for them, but at the same time, I don't think this is going to be a new normal.
Yeah, that sort of echoes my thoughts a little bit, although I do think next event, like regardless of co-streaming, and I'm pretty sure Riot will look to like dial it back and do kind of like the watch parties type thing that they do for League in the future. Like for now, it's just a good strategy to help your game blow up. But like, listen, I think I think Valorant's thrashing the pants of CS right now in terms of all of its marketing and all of its development. I think CS, like, I mean, I was talking about this just as an aside yesterday, and it's just like, you know, at a time when we have a like pretty exciting competitor that people can pick up and play and actually like, we have the most boring iteration of professional Counter-Strike we've ever had with the current economy, where you just have to save all the time on CT. Inferno is just a laborious nightmare. Formerly one of the great maps, perfect balance, always threw up exciting games, especially in a decider, you know, thin margins. Now it's just T's go on a site, do and execute. If they get 2 kills, CT save. Rinse and repeat until someone wins in overtime or 16-14. It's garbage. I'm finding watching Counter-Strike really tedious and laborious. Having just come out of a tournament where I watched like every map in that tournament live in real time without being able to tear my eyes off it, except, you know, like when I'm getting a drink or whatever. It's a fucking struggle, and I think everything is going wrong for Counter-Strike right now at a time when everything is going right for Valorant, and we need to course correct it very, very soon. But I think Valorant's gonna be very successful. I don't think there's any doubt about it at this point.
I only watched a bit, and the thing is, I'm not like a huge fan of the game. I think it's all right, but like the problem is, as long as Counter-Strike exists, I have no real reason to put time into it. My problem is this: I'll say the thing that hurts everyone's feelings, but it's true. So the usual Thorin approach. I actually saw like H2K and Rich had a tweet like this, and it's exactly the sentiment that I feel. And unfortunately, it is a big turn off for me with Valorant, which goes like this. If you actually know who some of the players who were the top players in Valorant were when they were in CSGO, it instantly saps so much of what would make the game sexy. I'll give you an example. Who was the most... Let's see if Monty can guess, right? Who was the most talked about player in the Valorant tournament from social media, from what you saw on your timeline? There was one player really stood out in this regard. Who would you pick, Monty? Boaster from Fnatic, right? Yeah. Now, here's the problem, Monty. I met that Boaster guy about 3 or 4 years ago when I went to Gfinity when they were only doing UK team tournaments, and he was a player for just one of those teams. I can't even remember which one. It might have been Infused or one of those UK orgs, right? Now, since then, he didn't do anything else in CSGO. He just kept playing, I think, around like tier 4 or whatever, and I think he even played like League of Legends a little bit. And he was just trying a bunch of games out. He is in the, like, isn't he like the captain of like the #1 European team in Valorant? Right? Here's the contrast. Here's the contrast. Yeah, that's what I mean. Here's the contrast for people. I also met Smooya for the first time all those years ago in like 2017. Now imagine if Smooya had never done anything else since. He didn't go and play for Big. He didn't have his time in the Chaos team. He did nothing. And then I just heard like last week, by the way, Smooya is probably the best player in all of Valorant. I'd be like, the fuck, what is this game then? And then the other thing is, the ones who aren't like the mega washed tier 4 players were the people who had talent in CSGO, they just hadn't made it yet. That just makes it look like, I'm sorry, like if you have any skill at CSGO, you're just instantly the best player in Valorant. Like that's. I know it's not as simple as that, but that is what it feels like from the outside. So it's not that that's an issue, but I suspect personally, for me, it's like since I'm not feeling the game that much, I'm just gonna keep waiting. So if in 6 months the game I fuck with it, by then there's probably better players and some of these players are out. I'm sorry, it's just the reality.
Well, the reality of any new game is that you're gonna get some kind of half-washed or completely washed pros from a different game. They're going to be the best at first, and then in 2 years, when the 15-year-olds who have played nothing but Valorant come through and they're 17, they're going to dumpster all these guys, and that's when you, in my experience in esports, that's when you really have the first test of a game, because you need to build up those new stars very effectively, or the game is just popular enough to survive a bunch of these popular personalities leaving.
I mean, it's already happening. You're already starting to see it cycle out. There's Dazed was the latest casualty.
I mean, I hate to be a dick, but like Hiko's not going to be here in 2 years. You know what I mean?
No, I think Spence knows that as well.
No,
right?
a lot of them are cynical. They know.
They've got their eyes open about it, especially like the NA players. I think what's more, where I deviate a little bit from what Duncan says, although I think it's like, it is sort of a universal truth in the sense that, for example, Scream was one of the top rated players at the tournament. I think the second overall. But then what also is exciting is Yampy had a really good tournament. TenZ, who we didn't even get to see very much in CSGO, obviously fucking blows up, rated MVP for Sentinels, finally gets his big transfer, makes all that bread. He is going to be a competitive player for Sentinels moving forward rather than a streamer. And you know, there's some players coming through now that were young enough when they kind of got out of CS that it sort of justified that they go on to have a career in another game. You know, there's inexplicable stuff. Like it's mind blowing to me that Shazam is on the best
know, that was
team
a
in the
weird one, innit?
world right now. But mate, he's not only is he on the best team in the world, he's integral to that team. You know, he kills it at what he does. So but yeah, I mean, so here's one other thing I noticed about it, and I hope Riot stopped doing this. But I'm pretty sure, because a few people behind the scenes were saying, "Oh, this is how it is." Riot were telling all the players to do all those like mad, cringeworthy dancing and
that actually
flexing
ruins it if that's
celebrations
true.
and
Because
stuff.
even though, listen, like
Yeah.
I actually, by the way, we were going to do that for Flashpoint. We were going to even work with people and give them like, even though I do think it's a good concept for the broadcast, unfortunately, what made those ones seem cool is that they felt organic, didn't they? You thought,
I like
oh,
the
teams have
airplane
come up
one.
with
That
this.
one was
Yeah.
fun. I thought they were fun. I like the Korean team with like, look, I think Vanity's cat ears are stupid as fuck, but like I like them doing like the snipping of the ears and everything like that. That's just classic like Korean esports shit right there.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah,
what the analogy
but
should have been. Here's the analogy. Basically, what I don't fuck with in Valorant is that Valorant feels like I think it was maybe like 10 years ago when WWE, its main competition became like TNA or whatever, which was all the super old washed wrestling stars that couldn't be on WWE anymore, but still have some fan appeal, and then the people who haven't made it to WWE yet. That's what Valorant feels like right now. Because as he says, it's fucking Eco Scream, Existence Happy, and fuckers like that, and Shazam. They're like the power players with the people who didn't quite make it yet in CS. So like, I guess nothing wrong with that. They might end up being really good players. Some of them probably will make it through, a rare few. But like as Monty says, it's not even being cynical. It's just the nature of esports. Like the first wave. Part of why they, like, think about it, right? Essentially, they get to have all the upside now. Like they have their experience, they have some basic level of skill at the game, they have all the positives right now. But the reasons that made them not the best in CS now will eventually catch up to them in Valorant, essentially.
And
beyond rare examples.
It's incredibly rare in any esport to really have like a transcendent talent emerge in the first 2 to 3 years of the esport. Like you start to see like some of the all-time greats or some of like the true star players that change how the game is played. It takes a few years for that to happen. And you know, Valorant, they don't even really have like a full map pool yet, so I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I think what's more interesting to me is that the dominant topic of conversation isn't co-streaming, because that's like a wild problem. And like you can see that Riot is even themselves unhappy with it, because here's something nobody talked about, Duncan, is that they effectively franchised co-streaming for LCS.
True.
That's what they did. And there has been almost no commentary on the fact that they locked co-streaming because it was getting out of control. Because the only reason you do that is because you want to prevent other new people from becoming the new dominant co-streaming stars and being able to shape that narrative. So they know that they can't make people mad by getting rid of the current co-streamers that they like, but they're going to do everything in their power to control the co-streamers that they have, including controlling their content outside of co-streaming, because they have these new very ambiguous rules about, oh yeah, you can't, you have to treat the league with this amount of respect, and it's at their complete discretion. No, but it's at their complete discretion to pull co-streaming from these people. And this is going to, because those co-stream licenses are worth millions of dollars to those co-streamers. Yeah. Basically now the LCS co-streamers, the entirety of their content has been compromised in terms of integrity, because they can no longer issue opinions in any other form of their content. Otherwise, that gets pulled.
Which may as well literally have been called the LS Dom, please stop talking about LCS problems on face check rule.
Yep.
May as well just be called that. Like that's outrageous.
I mean, face check is just
so transparent what they're trying to do with that, isn't it? I know.
No, but this is exactly what they did before. I've told you, Riot don't do anything without an angle. And they did this when they first came into the scene, and they coaxed across, stop me if you've heard this one, coaxed across a lot of personalities and influencers, and they were super nice to begin with. Oh, what's that? You want 10 skins to give away on your stream? Here's 100. Like here's a limited edition thing. Here's this. Oh, if you get us all the referrals, we'll put you in the game. We'll do all this cool stuff. But then of course the proviso is once your content becomes reliant on that, they can take it away, and now you have to do whatever Daddy Riot says. And Daddy Riot is not a nice daddy. Daddy Riot is the worst daddy, and will make it abundantly clear if you say anything negative about them, you will be unpersoned. Literally, not
Well,
in some weird as in what they do in Scientology.
They'll invent reasons too, right? That's the whole issue.
Yeah.
Like they went back years to pull out some quotes that Dominate said like years ago. In solo queue games, and then use that to like punish him in the present. This is why I'm so scared of their like voice recording of all Valorant games, because I'm sure that 99% of the time it's going to be used to find people who are abusive on the ladder, but 1% of the time they're going to dig through all of Shroud's voice recordings or like all of somebody's voice recordings to find something mildly wrong that they said, and then use that to justify a punishment because they can't nail someone for things that they're actually doing right now that Riot doesn't like because of the PR pushback.
I mean, let's be real, Monty. Riot is so fucking deluded about what their purview is. They think it's appropriate to publicly say we are penalizing this person who is being investigated for sexual misconduct because they would not share a sex tape with us. That's where they're at mentally. So I mean, the idea anyone by the way should feel good and comfortable about anyone at Riot having anything personal about them whatsoever, given their most egregious abuses against multiple people. You're insane, is what I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah,
but the whole co-streaming thing is a massive topic of conversation for our industry because it's not good. I mean, so here's who it's good for. This is, again, we keep hitting into this conflict between what is good for the developers marketing a game and what is good for the actual esports industry as a sports product. Because what's good for Riot as the developer is co-streaming, right? What is bad for us who are trying to monetize the esports broadcast is not having control over the sponsorship messages, not having, because do you think Shroud really gives a shit about Riot sponsors or the event sponsors? No, he's going to like click away from the stream during breaks and like talk to his stream and talk over it and do his own thing, which is, that's what he does as a streamer. It's not a fault against him, but it is a huge problem when we're trying to make this space feasible from a monetary perspective. And unless there is something from the developer that says, okay, the bigger viewership is leading to more skin sales and we are going to subsidize the broadcasts as a result of this because we want this. But that just doesn't happen. You know what I mean? So it's really hard for us to have good production, from a tournament organization angle and still offer the broadcast for free if 2/3 of the viewership is going to be on co-streaming in a game like Valorant. Like, just as a TO, I'm not averse to doing more Valorant events, right? But I struggle to see how I would go into pitch meetings with sponsors and explain how, no, actually, you're only going to get 1/3 of the viewership on the mainstream and I can't control. Maybe they don't even look at the sponsor when it's coming on. Maybe I can't control what they say. Maybe they're like, I don't like that product when it comes on. Like, I have no idea what these people are going to do. And it's very hard for me to sell a sponsor in that environment. Right, which is just terrible for the esports industry.
I've got 5 minutes left, so either that has to be the last question or we have to do one now.
All right, we'll do one now. This is an interesting one. This is the last one we'll do today. Do you guys have any interesting info on the BAMTech Riot deal that fell through a few years ago? I do. As far as I know, so to explain what it was a $300 million deal that Riot announced, which BAMTech is Major League Baseball's streaming platform, which is actually quite good. Good tech behind it. It's one of the good things that Major League Baseball has done in the last 10 years. And so what they did was they sold rights to this, and then we never knew what happened because it was like, is it going to be on this platform? It never was on the platform. Is it going to be exclusive? Are they trying to move away from Twitch? Now, to my understanding, The deal fell through because Disney acquired the technology from Major League Baseball, from BAMTech, and then they canceled the deal. And as far as I know, Riot never got any of that money, the $300 million, because it never actually went on the platform. But it was very weird that they announced this partnership and then there's nothing ever happened with it. I don't know if you know anything more about it, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, I actually had the proprietary player they built in the original.
There we go.
I've still got it. I'm literally just checking my emails now. But yeah, I had a copy of the player. I can't remember if I publicly leaked that or not. But yeah, I mean, basically, you've hit the nail on the head. The deal essentially fell through, predicated, from what I remember, without checking anything, predicated on the fact that it was all the parties that originally agreed upon it were there, and then you had this Disney acquisition, and then suddenly Disney weren't too sure about what they wanted to do because they had a completely separate roadmap for esports. So it wasn't something that couldn't happen. It wasn't that they had any particular objections. It was just that deal that had been inked and penned, they weren't going to honor it while they were sort of looking at whether or not they could apply that roadmap. So it was essentially cruelly snatched away. So
yeah, which actually is terrible, guys.
Yeah.
Because what sucks is that the BAMTech actual technology and the streaming platform is good tech. And right now, what is happening in the industry is that there is a crisis of media rights where no one is actually willing to pay for esports media rights. And if there was a viable Twitch competitor, which this could have been, and certainly $300 million being injected into the League of Legends esports ecosystem and the ability to sell with that would have been really, really helpful. But ever since kind of the Overwatch League deals went through at Twitch, there haven't, and at YouTube later, there just haven't been major media rights deals that have occurred. And considering that's one of the best ways to monetize traditional sports broadcasts, I mean, esports is not in a good place right now, guys. I'm just going to straight up say it. Good. We don't have ticket sales, so we can't monetize from really in-person events on a regular basis like traditional sports. Fans don't buy a lot of merch. We can't sell media rights to anybody right now because of the Twitch monopoly, basically. The revenue is not good. It's basically only sponsors. So, I mean, something's got to change about this model because we're not on a sustainable path in esports right now because the broadcasts themselves are so challenging to monetize. It's really bad. So I wish BAMTech had happened, frankly.
Yeah,
I don't have any thoughts on it. Finish up.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Join the Discord. Insight on Esports, YouTube and Twitch. Who knows if we're going to be doing this again? Probably next week. We would have done this sooner, but Richard and I were super busy with the RMRs, so we couldn't get it as fast as we would have liked to. But thanks for GoMeZ for joining us.